Infernal Divine Clan leader was an incredible figure and a giant of the Dark World. Even Infernal King of the Dark Court was his junior. He was now at the near-deity plane and had obtained a dark divine arm. His abilities were powerful, yet Futian, a junior, dared to talk to him in such a manner. Although he knew that Futian was very powerful, for the latter to act so presumptuously before him, wasn't he being overconfident? "Sword Lord, I will leave this to you," Futian said to Supreme Sword Lord. "All right," replied the latter as he nodded his head. He admired Futian's attitude. If they did not show their might, others would take them to be pushovers. No matter which force it was, if they had made a move to snatch another person's imperial arm, it was considered a declaration of war. What more needed to be said to those who attempted to kill someone and steal their imperial arm? There was naturally nothing that needed to be discussed. They would speak with their fists. Futian extended his hand, and the divine ruler immediately appeared. His entire body shone with brilliant divine light. He was a sight to behold. Buzz. Sword will burst forth from the figure of Supreme Sword Lord and envelop the region below. The cultivators of Ziwei Imperial Palace were enveloped inside his sword will. The cultivators in the distance also wisely retreated. They would be in grave danger if they were near a battle of this level. Dark Saint Hua Yunting frowned. Matters seemed to have escalated out of control and had become very bad. If the Dark Court began fighting with Futian, it was clearly a lose-lose situation. Neither side would benefit from this. However, Futian was fully prepared to attack. The situation was already beyond their control. In the heavens above, increasingly terrifying destructive will burst forth. The world seemed to become purgatory. In this space, flowing dark currents contained frightening destructive will. They were capable of killing anyone who touched them. Countless dark currents circled around the body of Infernal Divine Clan leader. This caused the region where he stood to turn hideous and terrifying. The currents were like countless tentacles. They then immediately grabbed out at Futian down below. Behind Futian, there suddenly appeared a dazzling yin-yang diagram. This diagram instantly expanded. Emerald green divine light circulated within it. The diagram released the terrifying power of yin and yang that shone on the dark currents. In an instant, the constant currents sweeping towards Futian were reduced to dust. Tumble. A dull thud could be heard. Destructive dark spears traversed across the sky and charged towards Futian. They plummeted straight towards their target like countless beams of destructive light. It was as though doomsday had befallen this region. Futian extended his arm, and an enormous wheel of space appeared. It radiated unparalleled divine halos and engulfed all the incoming spears. Infernal Divine Clan leader revealed an astonished look when he saw this. The wheel of space, which could swallow everything, was gigantic. It was akin to a black hole, sucking his attacks into another space and causing them to dissipate without a trace. Buzz. Suddenly, Infernal Divine Clan leader detected a strong sense of danger. He thrust his spear downwards, and it collided with the divine ruler that was charging towards him. The divine ruler was as sharp as a sword. T's terrifying power sent the clan leader flying upwards uncontrollably. Sword will overwhelmed the space and flooded his body. The clan leader snorted. His body emanated dark divine light to negate the power of the sword will. However, now, Futian's body disappeared from his sight. This is bad. The facial expression of the clan leader changed drastically as he immediately ordered, "Retreat." Rumble. There was a dull thud as the domain that enveloped the region was penetrated. Futian's figure immediately pierced through it. Infernal Divine Clan leader looked towards Futian, and his expression was extremely ugly. The next moment, he saw Futian stabbing out at the various cultivators of the Infernal Divine Clan. The cultivators of the Infernal Divine Clan revealed shocked expressions. Futian had broken through the domain of a near-deity cultivator. They released their most powerful auras of the Great Path. Even the youth, who had massacred people in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path, had a look of terror in his eyes. This sword directly pierced across the space. Everywhere the sword will passed over, figures fell out of the sky. They perished on the spot. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. Few thanks. When the cultivators in the distance saw the cultivators of the infernal divine clan perish one by one, they were astonished. Yi Futian was exterminating the infernal divine clan. The youth was not dead. Yi Futian had spared him, but he was still standing before the youth and staring at him. "Save me," the youth pleaded as he looked towards infernal divine clan leader. "Yi Futian, you attacked the members of my clan?" said infernal divine clan leader in a voice as cold as ice. Yi Futian ignored him. He extended his palm and placed it on the other party's head. The youth showed no signs of resistance. "I said that you would pay with your life," said Yi Futian as he stared into the youth's eyes. A terrifying divine fire burst forth from his palm. In an instant, the youth was consumed by the divine flames. They seared through his body and burnt his spiritual soul into a crisp. The youth let out agonizing screams. His body was slowly disintegrated by the divine flames and was reduced to nothingness. Everyone was shocked at Yi Futian's methods. He had killed off the young clan leader of the infernal divine clan so brutally. His methods were ruthless and decisive, showing no signs of mercy. Infernal divine clan leader's facial expression was extremely ugly. Murderous intent filled the sky as terrifying destructive will encapsulated the vast space, turning it into purgatory. Yi Futian's gaze was serene. He did not seem concerned at all. He turned towards infernal divine clan leader calmly and said, "Did you not consider that I would do this when you attacked my disciple?" Before Yi Futian's arrival, infernal divine clan leader attacked Feng Siyuan and Duo Yu to kill them. If it weren't because Little Condor protected them with the help of the divine body of Karura, they would most likely have perished. Since the clan leader showed Feng Siyuan and Duo Yu no mercy, Yi Futian would not hesitate to do the same. Moreover, there were old grudges between Yi Futian and infernal divine clan. He had no reason to spare them. With a strike, Yi Futian directly eradicated all the cultivators from the infernal divine clan. The members of other top forces from the dark world felt their hearts tremble violently as they witnessed the scene. Yi Futian showed no sign of fear when facing the Dark Court and the infernal divine clan, one of the dark world's top forces. He had no scruples about massacring the members of the infernal divine clan. This caused the crowd to be fearful of him. They had to consider the consequences carefully before they decided to attack Yi Futian. If they couldn't kill him on the spot, he would certainly take his revenge on them in the future. Yi Futian pointed the divine ruler at infernal divine clan leader. A few years ago, Yi Futian was targeted by Shinyan Buddha Lord when he was about to leave Yi Imperial Palace. He then slaughtered the latter in their fight. Now, he had no reason to fear infernal divine clan leader. The latter wielded an imperial arm, but so had Shinyan Buddha Lord back then. He wielded a Buddhist divine sword, yet he still perished. Right at this moment, the sky in the distance dimmed. An even more menacing aura permeated the space. Many people looked in that direction. Their hearts palpitated frenziedly. The cultivators, who stood at the peak of the Dark Court, had arrived. Dark Saint's heart also throbbed as he looked in the direction where the aura came from. He had an uneasy feeling. He vaguely sensed something. The incoming person was crowned the next divine saint before Yi Qingyao had joined the Dark Court. At the same time, in a different location, Yu Sheng also reached this place. There was also a peerless beauty dressed in white. It was unknown when she had also arrived in this region. Yi Futian sized up the people who had arrived. The leading cultivator had an unfathomable aura on him. He stood there, his vibe similar to that of the Dark Lord. An ethereal aura emanated from his figure, giving off a very powerful, threatening will. Yi Futian had never met this person before. The other party had not participated in the battle in the Old Heaven Court. Back when the Devil World was at war with the Divine Prefecture, the Dark World had merely assisted. They did not send their strongest members. Yi Qingyao later joined the battlefield, but this person had not appeared before. Although Yi Futian had never met him before, he could guess the status of this person in the Dark Court just by looking at his imposing manner as well as the large group of cultivators behind him. Futian had come in contact with the top cultivators from the various worlds. Ji Wudao had great Skylords Black and White Almighty as guardians. Donghuang Diyuan was also accompanied by top-tier cultivators. The Empty Divine Realm had Dugu Wuxia, and the Devil World had Yin Gi and so on. Before this, he had encountered Dark Saint Hua Yunting from the Dark Court. However, Hua Yunting was not their strongest figure. He was still far lacking. Rumor has it that the most powerful figure aside from the Dark Lord in the Dark Court was Lord Shaman. He was the great shaman and the leader of the three Dark Sages. Legend has it that Lord Shaman was the second disciple of the Dark Lord. He had been a disciple of the Dark Lord for a very long time. Back then, the head disciple was similarly outstanding with extraordinary talent. He was peerless, and his status in the Dark Court was exceptional. His personality was kind and compassionate. He guided his younger brothers in their cultivation. However, it was precisely this that cost him his life. In the Dark World, kindness was taboo. It went against the path of darkness. In the end, this head disciple was killed by his younger brother, Lord Shaman. The latter took everything he owned and inherited his position. The Dark Lord had silently acknowledged all that had transpired. Since then, Lord Shaman became the heir of the Dark Court and the leader of the three Dark Sages. The disciples after him neither dared to contend with him nor attack him. Someone had tried to do so before, and the consequences were tragic. Currently, Lord Shaman was already a giant-level figure. He was the mightiest person in the Dark Court aside from the Dark Lord. Even Dark Flame Sage and Dark Saint posed no threat to his position. This was the status quo until Yi Qingyao appeared in the Dark World. She was known as the Dark Maiden and was later given the title the Reaper. The Dark Lord treated her as though she was one of his own disciples. He even forbade everyone in the Dark Court from harming her. Because of this, Yi Qingyao managed to survive in the Dark World and could keep on growing. If she did not have the special protection of the Dark Lord, she wouldn't have been able to survive at all. Lord Shaman greeted the cultivators of the Dark Court. When they saw Lord Shaman arriving, they all frantically bowed to him and acted very polite. They were very respectful towards him as they all feared him. Even his younger brothers felt the same. Lord Shaman was extremely ruthless in his ways. Back then, even his elder brother, who had taken extra good care of him and trained him, had been killed by him. One could imagine what sort of cultivator he was. The world did not doubt that he would even kill the Dark Lord and take his place if he was powerful enough. The Dark Lord himself was well aware of this fact. Worthless, this was originally the law of survival in the Dark World that he had established. Lord Shaman greeted Infernal Divine Clan leader. Then, even an extraordinary cultivator like Infernal Divine Clan leader was bowing towards Lord Shaman. The Dark World was different from the Divine Prefecture. The Dark Court's authority was absolute. For the Dark World forces, they usually did not need to worry about the Dark Court on a day-to-day basis. However, no one dared to disobey orders when the latter sent down orders. No one could bear the consequences of doing so. Hence, the cultivators of the various forces of the Dark World had profound respect towards the Dark Court. Lord Shaman was accustomed to receiving such reverence from the crowd. He swept a glance at the corpse, and it slowly floated upwards. Bring younger brother's body back to the Dark Court and bury him in the graveyard of the Divine Mountain, Lord Shaman commanded. Yes, sir, responded one of the cultivators who stood behind him as he stepped forward to retrieve the body. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. Few thanks. Lord Shaman fixed his gaze on one of the cultivators from the Dark Court. His eyes glistened with terrifying crimson light. His presence was undoubtedly scary. Lord Shaman, the cultivator cried out. He was a Ran Huang, but he revealed a look of intense fear when his eyes met with Lord Shaman's. You followed younger brother. He has perished in battle, yet you are unscathed. Why are you still alive? As soon as Lord Shaman said this, his menacing crimson gaze penetrated space and pierced the eyes of the Ran Huang. The Ran Huang let out a blood-curdling shriek as blood oozed out from his eyes. Two beams of crimson light shot into his pupils and punctured his brain. It was a frightening scene to behold. Arg! The Run Huang covered his eyes with his hands. Blood tainted his fingers red. He looked miserable. His body was shaking uncontrollably, as though he was experiencing the cruelest torture in the world. He felt as though his spiritual soul was being torn apart from his body. He could see many gruesome scenes flashing before his eyes as he was drowned in the crimson eyes of Lord Shaman. His past experiences replayed in his mind. Splat. The crimson light seared 2 holes through the Renhuang's brain. The dreadful torture had finally ended for the cultivator from the Dark Court. He collapsed to the ground, and his blood flushed the ground red. The surrounding space turned exceptionally quiet. Even though the person Lord Shaman killed was just a Renhuang, it still impacted everyone around greatly. The way the Dark Court cultivators handled things was indeed ruthless. Lord Shaman acted so cruelly when punishing his own underlings. One could imagine how much more savage he would be when he faced his opponents. From the looks of it, things were sure to turn ugly today. The first thing this great shaman from the Dark Court did upon arrival was torture a member of his court to death. How would he possibly let the cultivators who killed his younger brother leave here alive? When Dark Saint Hua Yunting saw this scene, he knew things had taken a turn for the worse. Lord Shaman was putting on a show of force. "Capture everyone who was involved in the murder of younger brother," ordered Lord Shaman in an indifferent tone. He said this with a commanding voice, leaving no room for misinterpretation. "Yes, Lord Shaman," responded several cultivators of the Dark Court behind him as they stepped forward. They were all cultivators who had survived the divine tribulation of the Great Path. They had come forward to arrest those involved. He was going to capture all those involved in the death of his younger brother. That included Fong Siyuan, Duo Yu, and the others. Fong Siyuan raised the golden halberd in his hand and pointed it at Lord Shaman. The golden halberd unleashed astonishing murderous intent. Fighting will circled his figure. Fong Siyuan was originally an extremely unruly person. He would not surrender just like that. Duo Yu's gaze was similarly as cold as ice. He raised the long spear in his hands. His eyes became bizarre and frightening. They were the eyes of samsara. "Kill anyone who attacks us without mercy," Yi Futian ordered as he looked at Fong Siyuan and the others. "Yes, master," replied Fong Siyuan. Supreme Sword Lord was also beside him. Sword will circled his figure and enveloped the space. His aura was extremely astonishing. When the cultivators of the Dark Court saw this scene, all of them took a few steps forward. A terrifying dark aura was released. It covered the sky, and in an instant, the sky was dyed black, plunging the world into darkness. The sky turned dark. Yi Futian sized up the people who had arrived. The leading cultivator had an unfathomable aura on him. He stood there, his vibe similar to that of the Dark Lord. An ethereal aura emanated from his figure, giving off a very powerful, threatening will. Yi Futian had never met this person before. The other party had not participated in the battle in the Old Heaven Court. Back when the Devil World was at war with the Divine Prefecture, the Dark World had merely assisted. They did not send their strongest members. Yi Qingyao later joined the battlefield, but this person had not appeared before. Although Yi Futian had never met him before, he could guess the status of this person in the Dark Court just by looking at his imposing manner as well as the large group of cultivators behind him. Yi Futian had come in contact with the top cultivators from the various worlds. Ji Wudao had great Sky Lords Black and White Almighty as guardians. Donghuang Diyuan was also accompanied by top-tier cultivators. The Empty Divine Realm had Dugu Wuxia, and the Devil World had Yin Gi and so on. Before this, he had encountered Dark Saint Hua Yunting from the Dark Court. However, Hua Yunting was not their strongest figure. He was still far lacking. Rumor has it that the most powerful figure aside from the Dark Lord in the Dark Court was Lord Shaman. He was the great shaman and the leader of the 3 Dark Sages. Legend has it that Lord Shaman was the second disciple of the Dark Lord. He had been a disciple of the Dark Lord for a very long time. Back then, the head disciple was similarly outstanding with extraordinary talent. He was peerless, and his status in the Dark Court was exceptional. His personality was kind and compassionate. He guided his younger brothers in their cultivation. However, it was precisely this that cost him his life. In the dark world, kindness was taboo. It went against the path of darkness. In the end, this head disciple was killed by his younger brother, Lord Shaman. The latter took everything he owned and inherited his position. The Dark Lord had silently acknowledged all that had transpired. Since then, Lord Shaman became the heir of the Dark Court and the leader of the three Dark Sages. The disciples after him neither dared to contend with him nor attack him. Someone had tried to do so before, and the consequences were tragic. Currently, Lord Shaman was already a giant-level figure. He was the mightiest person in the Dark Court aside from the Dark Lord. Even Dark Flame Sage and Dark Saint posed no threat to his position. This was the status quo until Yi Qingyao appeared in the Dark World. She was known as the Dark Maiden and was later given the title the Reaper. The Dark Lord treated her as though she was one of his own disciples. He even forbade everyone in the Dark Court from harming her. Because of this, Yi Qingyao managed to survive in the Dark World and could keep on growing. If she did not have the special protection of the Dark Lord, she wouldn't have been able to survive at all. Lord Shaman greeted the cultivators of the Dark Court. When they saw Lord Shaman arriving, they all frantically bowed to him and acted very polite. They were very respectful towards him as they all feared him. Even his younger brothers felt the same. Lord Shaman was extremely ruthless in his ways. Back then, even his elder brother, who had taken extra good care of him and trained him, had been killed by him. One could imagine what sort of cultivator he was. The world did not doubt that he would even kill the Dark Lord and take his place if he was powerful enough. The Dark Lord himself was well aware of this fact. Worthless, this was originally the law of survival in the Dark World that he had established. Lord Shaman greeted Infernal Divine Clan leader. Then, even an extraordinary cultivator like Infernal Divine Clan leader was bowing towards Lord Shaman. The Dark World was different from the Divine Prefecture. The Dark Court's authority was absolute. For the Dark World forces, they usually did not need to worry about the Dark Court on a day-to-day basis. However, no one dared to disobey orders when the latter sent down orders. No one could bear the consequences of doing so. Hence, the cultivators of the various forces of the Dark World had profound respect towards the Dark Court. Lord Shaman was accustomed to receiving such reverence from the crowd. He swept a glance at the corpse, and it slowly floated upwards. Bring younger brother's body back to the Dark Court and bury him in the graveyard of the Divine Mountain, Lord Shaman commanded. Yes, sir, responded one of the cultivators who stood behind him as he stepped forward to retrieve the body. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. Few thanks. Lord Shaman fixed his gaze on one of the cultivators from the Dark Court. His eyes glistened with terrifying crimson light. His presence was undoubtedly scary. Lord Shaman, the cultivator cried out. He was a Ran Huang, but he revealed a look of intense fear when his eyes met with Lord Shaman's. You followed younger brother. He has perished in battle, yet you are unscathed. Why are you still alive? As soon as Lord Shaman said this, his menacing crimson gaze penetrated space and pierced the eyes of the Ran Huang. The Ran Huang let out a blood-curdling shriek as blood oozed out from his eyes. Two beams of crimson light shot into his pupils and punctured his brain. It was a frightening scene to behold. Arg! The Ran Huang covered his eyes with his hands. Blood tainted his fingers red. He looked miserable. His body was shaking uncontrollably, as though he was experiencing the cruelest torture in the world. He felt as though his spiritual soul was being torn apart from his body. He could see many gruesome scenes flashing before his eyes as he was drowned in the crimson eyes of Lord Shaman. His past experiences replayed in his mind. Splat! The crimson light seared 2 holes through the Ran Huang's brain. The dreadful torture had finally ended for the cultivator from the Dark Court. He collapsed to the ground, and his blood flushed the ground red. The surrounding space turned exceptionally quiet. Even though the person Lord Shaman killed was just a Ran Huang, it still impacted everyone around greatly. The way the Dark Court cultivators handled things was indeed ruthless. Lord Shaman acted so cruelly when punishing his own underlings. One could imagine how much more savage he would be when he faced his opponents. From the looks of it, things were sure to turn ugly today. The first thing this great shaman from the Dark Court did upon arrival was torture a member of his court to death. How would he possibly let the cultivators who killed his younger brother leave here alive? When Dark Saint Hua Yunting saw this scene, he knew things had taken a turn for the worse. Lord Shaman was putting on a show of force. "Capture everyone who was involved in the murder of younger brother," ordered Lord Shaman in an indifferent tone. He said this with a commanding voice, leaving no room for misinterpretation. "Yes, Lord Shaman," responded several cultivators of the Dark Court behind him as they stepped forward. They were all cultivators who had survived the divine tribulation of the Great Path. They had come forward to arrest those involved. He was going to capture all those involved in the death of his younger brother. That included Feng Siyuan, Duo Yu, and the others. Feng Siyuan raised the golden halberd in his hand and pointed it at Lord Shaman. The golden halberd unleashed astonishing murderous intent. Fighting will circled his figure. Feng Siyuan was originally an extremely unruly person. He would not surrender just like that. Duo Yu's gaze was similarly as cold as ice. He raised the long spear in his hands. His eyes became bizarre and frightening. They were the eyes of Samsara. "Kill anyone who attacks us without mercy," Yi Futian ordered as he looked at Feng Siyuan and the others. "Yes, master," replied Feng Siyuan. Supreme Swordlord was also beside him. Sword will circled his figure and enveloped the space. His aura was extremely astonishing. When the cultivators of the Dark Court saw this scene, all of them took a few steps forward. A terrifying dark aura was released. It covered the sky, and in an instant, the sky was dyed black, plunging the world into darkness. The sky turned dark. Many cultivators were retreating away from the suppressive and terrifying space. They sensed that the battle was about to begin. It was not safe for a battle of this magnitude to be within a range of 1,000 miles, let alone the surrounding regions. No one knew how far the aftershocks would reach if these two cultivators unleashed their powers. Without holding back. However, most top cultivators would hold themselves back slightly when fighting. As the crowd retreated, their gazes were still fixed on the battlefield. They were very concerned about this storm. This was a battle between the Dark World and the Ziwei Segmentum. Now, Ziwei Imperial Palace had become one of the top forces aside from the Emperor-level forces. It was a superpower that had surpassed the ancient god clans. It could even be considered the #1 force aside from those Emperor-level forces. Several years ago, this point had been proven in the Old Heaven Court. The members of Ziwei Imperial Palace had fought against the various cultivators of the Heaven Realm. After that battle, the world knew that Ziwei Imperial Palace's power was only second to that of the Emperor-level forces. Even if the Dark Court wanted to take them down, it wouldn't be an easy feat to pull off. Moreover, Yi Futian's group had the backing of the heir of the Devil Emperor, Yu Sheng. He had received the teachings of the Demonic Lord. Several years ago, he had a short exchange with Ji Wudao in the Old Heaven Court. His ability was astonishing. With such a background, the Dark Court did not necessarily have the advantage, unless Yu Sheng did not participate in the battle and did not use the will of the Demonic Lord. Most likely, no one from Ziwei Imperial Palace could stand against Lord Shaman. The great shaman of the Dark Court was the strongest figure of the Dark Court aside from the Dark Lord. He was the leader of the 3 Dark Sages. No one knew how powerful his abilities were now. However, without a doubt, he would be among the strongest aside from the great emperors. "Show no mercy," said Lord Shaman as he slowly swept a glance at Yi Futian when he heard the latter speaking. There was a condescending look in his crimson pupils. He then looked at Supreme Swordlord. "Supreme Swordlord, you are a cultivator from the Divine Prefecture. This does not concern you. You have cultivated for so many years. Why get swept into this mess now? I will give you the chance to leave," said Lord Shaman nonchalantly. His words contained a cold and sinister aura that caused the surrounding people to feel uncomfortable. Although Supreme Swordlord had gained fame in the Divine Prefecture many years ago and was a powerful cultivator on the near-deity list, he did not have confidence that he could defeat the great shaman if pitted against the latter. "Then, I should be thanking you," Supreme Swordlord replied as he glanced back at Lord Shaman with a faint smile. Who did Lord Shaman think Supreme Swordlord was? Even though Supreme Swordlord was not an heir of an Emperor-level force, he was a near-deity-level existence who had been renowned for many years. In terms of seniority, he was above Lord Shaman. Now, the other party was speaking to him in such a manner and giving him the chance to leave. Supreme Swordlord was old, but his sword was still sharp. Lord Shaman naturally understood Supreme Swordlord's meaning. He did not say any more. His figure gradually floated up into the sky. His black robes danced in the wind. He extended both his hands, and immediately, the dark will in the sky ran amok. It was as though the end of the world had truly come. It was extremely terrifying. Furthermore, there were countless streaks of crimson light of catastrophe flashing amidst the dark storm. The appearance of the lights of catastrophe was unpredictable. It was as though the lights were a natural part of the storm. Many cultivators felt their spiritual souls trembling even though they were merely standing beneath the aura. Run! They lost interest in witnessing the battle as they swiftly took to their heels. Other cultivators might still consider onlookers while they were engaged in battle. However, this was Lord Shaman from the Dark Court. Would he care? Rumble, rumble, rumble. Terrifying collisions reverberated in space. Many crimson stone pillars suddenly plummeted onto the ground, sealing this vast region off. At the same time, a blood-red altar appeared in the sky. The entire domain turned into an altar of sacrifice. The place was enveloped by darkness. Lord Shaman stood on the altar like an almighty god as he looked down on Futian. There was contempt in his gaze. He roared, "Vermin, you are but a chess piece of the various forces. Yet, you dream of defying the gods and changing your fate. You do not know your place." His voice could be heard far and wide, and it reverberated in everyone's eardrums. He was absolutely domineering. Many cultivators were astonished. In the eyes of Lord Shaman, Futian was merely an ant. The latter was just a chess piece. Futian also looked up at the other party. Lord Shaman's ability was already at the peak of the near-deity plane. He was similar to First Demon Sage Yengi and Dugu Wuxia. He was among the strongest figures, aside from the great emperors. Once this crimson altar appeared, the other party controlled this domain. Was Futian an ant? Of course not. Was he a chess piece? In a sense, Futian was indeed a chess piece. The Dark World, the Devil World, and the empty Divine Realm all treated him like one. They used him to check and balance the Divine Prefecture. They didn't even mind, letting him grow stronger to the point that he could threaten Donghuang the Great. Back when the original realm was being thrown into chaos, these Emperor-level forces from the other worlds had spared Ziwei. Imperial Palace. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. Few thanks. If they had chosen to eradicate Ziwei Imperial Palace at that time, the latter would most likely not have been able to withstand their attacks and would have perished. Therefore, it was not wrong for Lord Shaman to say that Futian was a chess piece. However, if that was the case, who was the mastermind behind the scenes? Was it the Dark Court and the empty Divine Realm? The real mastermind most likely would not be so easily identified. If I wanted to take your life, I could do so anytime I want, continued Lord Shaman. Even though Futian's ability now was already exceptional, the latter still made such a statement. As he said this, bolts of crimson lightning descended within the dark domain like lights of catastrophe. They were like the power of judgment from heaven that could destroy everything in the world. Buzz. Powerful sword will burst forth from the divine sword in Supreme Swordlord's hand. A sword realm immediately enveloped the cultivators of Ziwei Imperial Palace around him. If this power came crashing down on them, ordinary cultivators would not be able to withstand it. They would perish to the crimson lightning. Is that so? Futian raised his head and glanced at Lord Shaman. Then, he said, "Today, I shall see for myself how you plan to take my life." Just when everyone thought Futian would dive into battle with Lord Shaman, the former turned around to look at the white-robed lady, who was standing behind him. This caused many people to raise their eyebrows in puzzlement. Do you want to test out the results of your recent training? Yi Futian asked Ling Long. Yi Futian believed that she would surely sharpen her skills with Lord Shaman, the most advanced cultivator in the dark court, as her opponent. After all, in Yi Imperial Palace, Ling Long was unrivaled. Now, Yi Futian had found her an opponent that didn't seem too shabby. "All right," replied Ling Long as she nodded her head. Then, she stepped forward and walked towards where Lord Shaman stood. This caused the various cultivators to reveal strange expressions. Not only was Yi Futian not fighting himself, he actually sent out a woman to fight on his behalf. This woman dressed in white had an extraordinary temperament. Her appearance was outstanding. No one recognized her, and they had never seen her before. However, even if she was extraordinary, Yi Futian asked, her to deal with Lord Shaman? Wasn't that tantamount to suicide? Chapter 27, 43 Situation. Lord Shaman saw a woman in white charging towards him. His eyes emitted terrifying crimson divine lights. With a wave of his hand, endless crimson divine lights of judgment appeared in the sky and descended towards Ling Long. She would be killed on the spot if she touched any of the divine light. Rumble. A shocking fighting will burst forth from Ling Long's body. The will shot up high into the sky and covered the entire region instantly. At this moment, the white-robed figure before Lord Shaman transformed from a maiden to a war god. This aura, thought Lord Shaman. His eyes narrowed as his facial expression changed slightly. Endless crimson divine lights of judgment rained down on Ling Long. The fighting will circled around her body. It was as though she was garbed in the armor of a war god. The crimson divine lights actually could not penetrate through her fighting will. Ling Long continued to pounce towards Lord Shaman, who was standing on the altar in the sky. This scene caused the spectating cultivators to narrow their eyes in astonishment. What was going on? How could this maiden be so dominant and powerful? As far as they were concerned, Lord Shaman's cultivation plane was already at the peak of the near-deity level. The divine power of the great path that he controlled was uniquely his. If a two-tribulation cultivator were hit by his crimson divine light, even they would likely perish on the spot. However, Lord Shaman's crimson divine light actually had not managed to break through the defense of the maiden. One could imagine the might of her fighting will. Who was this woman dressed in white? Ling Long flew higher into the sky, and soon, she approached the altar. She extended her fist and sent out an attack. Her punch appeared ordinary, yet it contained frightening Tiantian fist will. Bang, bang, bang. The blood-red altar was smashed into pieces in the blink of an eye. It crumbled right away after coming in contact with the aggressive fist will. It was as fragile as glass when faced with the woman's overwhelming fighting will. The fist will even continued charging upwards. It crashed into the crimson domain. A dull rumbling could be heard. The entire domain nearly collapsed instantly. Lord Shaman's figure appeared high in the sky. He had dodged the previous attack. A fighting will enveloped his figure as he stared at his opponent. The fighting will, which circled around the woman dressed in white, seemed to be a great emperor. Lord Shaman's will shifted, and an even more terrifying aura immediately burst forth. In the menacing blood-red space, destructive divine lights of judgment flowed all around. In his hand, a crimson scepter appeared. It was a highly mighty imperial arm that emanated powerful will. The cultivators below felt their hearts thump non-stop. With one attack, the woman in white forced Lord Shaman to take out his imperial arm. Clearly, Lord Shaman brought out his imperial arm because he suspected that he might not be able to withstand the other party's attacks with his ability alone. This woman in white was actually formidable to such an extent. "It is the scepter of dark judgment," someone commented. The hearts of the various cultivators trembled violently when they saw the scepter that Lord Shaman was wielding. This imperial arm was a precious treasure of the Dark Court. It had always been the weapon used by the great shaman of the Dark Court and was passed down from generation to generation. Since Lord Shaman was the current great shaman and the head of the three dark sages, this scepter of dark judgment was naturally under his control. He extended his arm and pointed the scepter to the heavens. The color of the sky changed instantaneously. An even more frightening blood-red storm stirred up in the space. When the crowd raised their heads, they could see a menacing vortex swirling above them. This vortex seemed capable of eradicating all living beings. Nothing could survive once they were sucked into it. Vast. Many people could feel that even their spiritual souls were quivering in fear. Their hearts beat frenziedly. They continued to retreat backward. They wanted to stay as far away from the storm as possible. No one could predict how terrifying Lord Shaman's next attack would be. Bang! With a crisp crack, the domain was shattered. It was as though the entire sky had transformed into the dark domain. The sky split open, and the crimson divine light that radiated from the scepter of dark judgment shot up into the high heavens. The power it emanated seemed to be summoning an apocalypse. The scene was too shocking to behold. Rumble. The sounds of thunder reverberated throughout the space. The next moment, myriads of crimson divine light rained down from the sky, with the momentum to smash the entire world into pieces. A beam of extraordinarily bright crimson divine light stood out amidst the densely packed lights. It coalesced into the shape of a sword as it charged towards Ling Long. Ling Long acutely sensed the power exerted by the divine light. Fighting will burst forth frenziedly from her body. She extended her palm, and immediately, countless divine swords surged towards the incoming attack. This technique that she was demonstrating was taught to her by Futian. He guided her to better utilize her power in her attacks. Bang! The crimson lights and the divine swords collided in the sky. The sky ruptured as the entire space shook violently. Destructive divine lights rampaged. However, even after making such a ruckus, Lord Shaman's attack failed to touch Ling Long. After she sent out her palm strike, she leaped into the sky and flew towards Lord Shaman. It seemed like she wanted to engage in close combat with the other party. Many cultivators below were not so lucky. Some of them did not manage to escape in time and were crushed by the destructive blow. Some less competent cultivators were incinerated when the crimson divine lights rained down. Their spiritual souls were reduced to dust, perishing on the spot. They had no means to defend themselves. Any cultivators who had yet to reach the tribulation plane did not stand a chance once such a high-level attack hit them. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. Few thanks. Futian took a glance at the battle happening in the sky. He was well aware of how capable Ling Long was. Even with the help of an imperial arm, Lord Shaman might not be a match for her. Over the past few years, Futian had verified her ability countless times. Therefore, Futian was not worried about the outcome of their battle. He shifted his gaze towards where infernal divine clan leaders stood. A moment ago, Futian had slaughtered everyone from his clan. Aside from this clan leader, everyone else was dead. Futian would finish what he started. He had no reason to let the clan leader escape. Divine light circled Futian as his aura locked onto infernal divine clan leader. The latter also sensed this. He retracted his gaze from the battlefield in the sky. He looked towards Futian as murderous intent circled him. He also had not imagined that Futian had such a terrifying existence like the woman dressed in white on his side. She could fight Lord Shaman, who was wielding an imperial arm, unarmed. Her combat ability would rank among the strongest beneath the great emperors. Such an individual was taking orders from Futian. In that case, the situation today would be disadvantageous to them. The direct disciple of the Dark Lord has been killed. Why aren't all of you attacking? Infernal Divine Clan Leader said as he looked at the cultivators from the Dark Court, as well as the various forces of the Dark World. Dark Saint Hua Yunting was also very powerful, and the Dark Court still had many cultivators who could join the battle. Dark Saint frowned when he saw that matters had spiraled out of control. As he had predicted, things had indeed gotten out of hand. No one knew how this battle would end. Buzz. Just as Infernal Divine Clan Leader said this, a sense of danger suddenly loomed over him. Futian's figure instantly charged forward. Divine light circled around the jade-green divine ruler. He charged directly at the clan leader. It was as though Futian had become a divine sword that could pierce through all powers of the Great Path and destroy all spiritual souls. The power of the Great Path furiously burst forth from his figure. Everywhere the divine light passed over, everything was reduced to dust. From Futian's figure, Infernal Divine Clan Leader sensed certain death, Chapter 2744, Slaying Yet Another Near Deity. Futian's figure disappeared from where he stood. When he appeared once again, he instantly descended upon infernal divine clan leader. The divine ruler stabbed out like a sharp sword and was extremely domineering. The clan leader never imagined that Futian would actually attempt to kill him in close combat. The long spear imperial arm in the former's hands similarly stabbed forward. The two terrifying powers clashed, and an astonishing storm was swept up. Buzz. Futian's figure disappeared again. Around infernal divine clan leader, there suddenly appeared many exterior incarnations of Futian. Dazzling jade-green divine light circled each of them. All of them seemed to possess the power of the divine ruler. These incarnations also seemed to never stop moving. More and more of them appeared, filling up the space around the clan leader. "This is a movement technique," said someone down below as they looked up at the battlefield in the sky. Futian not only possessed the Buddhist technique celerity, but he also cultivated movement techniques. He seemed to have millions of incarnations. No one could tell which was the original. The top forces knew that back in the relic of the old heaven court, Futian had obtained many divine stones that contained divine techniques. Had Futian cultivated this technique from them? Unbeknownst to them, this movement technique was not anything special. However, when used in conjunction with celerity, it became very powerful. No one could pinpoint where Futian's true body was at all. Nevertheless, against top cultivators, it was meaningless to merely be proficient in movement techniques. Behind infernal divine clan leader, a frightening gray silhouette of a god appeared. A dark domain enveloped the surrounding area. Dark infernal fire appeared in the entire domain. Fire engulfed the entire sky. Black lotuses blossomed from the flames and consumed the power in the surroundings. Terrifying infernal fire attempted to consume the incarnations of Futian. However, the incarnations seemed to surround the area and made the space an absolute domain. The sky was filled with jade-green divine light that blocked out the sun. Futian's phantasms were everywhere. Suddenly, the blinding light of Buddha pierced through the darkness. His incarnations became ancient golden Buddhas. All of them possessed indestructible golden bodies. The sound of Buddha reverberated across the sky. The power of the 6 syllables of truth circulated in the area. When the infernal fire descended on the figures of the ancient Buddhas, the fire was actually purified and extinguished. The infernal lotuses in this domain of space similarly withered. They seemed to be sealed by this domain. "It is a domain!" exclaimed various cultivators as they looked up at the region. Up until moments ago, the incarnations took the form of Futian. Suddenly, they became various Buddhas who filled the skies. Even more frighteningly, their figures were slanted and formed a ring above Futian and infernal divine clan leader. The light of Buddha shone brightly, and a gigantic Buddha Lord silhouette appeared. Bang! Menacing sounds reverberated as all the Buddhas unleashed all heaven Buddha's seal at the same time. Their palm strikes coalesced into a single Buddha's seal and headed straight towards infernal divine clan leader. "Palace Lord has grown stronger," Lord Chun thought as he observed the battle from the ground below. After a few years of cultivation, Futian's ability had further improved. Even though he had yet to break through the shackles of the plane, he had a more profound understanding of his techniques. Rumble. The clan leader raised his imperial arm. Immediately, infernal storms were whipped up in space. Destructive spears materialized from the eyes of the storms and shot out towards different directions. Each of them targeted a different part of the incoming Buddha's seal. A loud collision echoed in space. The spear hit the Buddha's seal. The latter covered the entire sky, and countless symbols of Wan were carved on it. It radiated with the dazzling light of Buddha. Its momentum pushed infernal divine clan leader slightly downwards. However, countless cracks appeared on the Buddha's seal when the power stored in the imperial arm exploded upon collision. Then, the seal disintegrated. The very next second, an intense killing intent permeated the space around the clan leader. A divine sword charged directly towards him from the heavens above. It was the heaven-slaying divine sword. The awe-inspiring sword slashed its way downwards. Infernal divine clan leader retaliated head-on with his spear. This time, The momentum of the enormous divine sword pressed down on the clan leader, causing him to slide down uncontrollably. "Get lost!" barked infernal divine clan leader as power frenziedly burst forth from his body. He was enveloped by a dark infernal storm. Endless dark currents twirled around the divine sword. The clan leader had activated his imperial arm to its utmost limit. "Presumptuous!" a voice rebuked loudly. The thunderous voice echoed in the mind of the clan leader. This sonic wave attack blasted his spiritual soul directly as it was laced with the spell power. The clan leader stared blankly at the heavens above. Then, he saw a pair of terrifying eyes. The pupils were jade green in color. The power of the divine ruler, which Futian devoured a few years ago, seemed to have perfectly merged with his own great path. It was now flowing in every single part of his body. Even his eyes contained its power. The clan leader activated his eye sorcery, and his eyes emitted divine lights. Terrifying will burst forth from his jet-black eyes. The infernal god appeared in the eye sorcery zone forged by the clan leader, and it swooped towards Futian along with the dark divine power. Futian gathered the power of the divine ruler in this very eye sorcery zone of his opponent. The infernal god then entered into a complete world. Futian was the god of this world, and his face formed the sky. He transformed into a Tianshan and appeared directly in the zone. As his divine ruler slashed down, its power was akin to the heavenly rule power. It was capable of eradicating all the paths in the world. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. Few thanks. This is bad. Infernal divine clan leader noticed that things had taken a turn for the worse. He frantically swung his imperial arm and destroyed the heaven-slaying divine sword. Clearly, he realized that Futian had transferred the power of the divine ruler into countering his eye sorcery. However, the clan leader did not have an imperial arm in his own eye sorcery zone. How did Futian manage to pull this off? In the eye sorcery zone of the clan leader, the divine ruler overcame all resistance and slayed its way downwards. Infernal divine clan leader unleashed a majestic might to withstand against it, but his effort was in vain as the divine ruler still penetrated through all things and stabbed into his body. He let out a dull groan. His will was severely injured. His eyes were shut tight as his body tumbled backwards. Buzz. A beam of dazzling divine light immediately pierced through the sky. Under the watch of countless astonished gazes, infernal divine clan leader's body trembled violently in the domain. The phantasm of a divine ruler penetrated his figure. His will as well as his flesh had been struck and penetrated by the divine ruler. Futian did not stop there. The crowd saw beams of jade-green divine light constantly flashing as they pierced his opponent's figure again and again. Finally, a divine ruler materialized and stabbed through infernal divine clan leader, pinning him to the domain. A near deity had perished in such a manner. He had been brutally murdered in battle. Chapter 2745, Betraying the Dark Court. He killed a demigod. The cultivators stared in shock at the scene in front of them. If not many people had been aware when Futian killed Shinyan Buddha Lord, the killing of the clan leader of the infernal divine clan this time around had been witnessed by many powerful parties. The battle between the Dark Court and Ziwei Imperial Palace previously had already attracted many interested parties. Futian had effortlessly killed a giant of the Dark Court, the infernal divine clan leader, even when he had the help of imperial arms. The Dark Court's infernal king was also stunned by what he had just seen and stared dumbfoundedly at the corpse that had been pierced to death by the divine ruler. His senior had been a powerful, dominating figure in the dark world and had ruled over the infernal divine clan. He was regarded as a giant in the dark world, akin to the clan leader of the ancient god clan from the divine prefecture. After the god's continent had surfaced, he had achieved demigod status, obtained imperial arms, and was on his way to greater glory. Yet now, he had been killed by Futian, and Futian had stolen his thunder. Some had watched Futian kill Shinyan Buddha Lord previously. In comparison to that occasion, Futian had had a much easier time killing the infernal divine clan's leader today. The difference in abilities between the both of them was substantial. Futian seemed to have perfectly harmonized the power of the divine ruler, and his current battle prowess ranked him as one of the strongest cultivators in the world. One probably had to be in the ranks of the strongest demigods to defeat Futian, examples being Lord Shaman, Yingyi, Dihao, and more. After Futian had killed Infernal Divine Clan's leader, he had taken the other's infernal spear. He put it away after glancing at it. He had returned Shinyin Buddha Lord's Buddhist divine sword to the Buddhist sect after killing him, but he naturally would not return the weapon to the Dark Court this time around. This was to be a spoil of the battle. Dark Saint looked at the white-haired figure. Even for the Dark Court, the number of people who could go up against Futian could be counted on one hand, while probably only Lord Shaman could be confident of getting the upper hand against him. Dark Flame Sage, and he might not even be able to do either. After all, Infernal Divine Clan's leader had been a demigod and was more or less on the same level as them. However, Lord Shaman, the strongest warrior in the Dark Court after the Great Emperor, did not seem to even have the advantage in his current battle. You could even say he was the underdog. He had been on the losing side ever since the battle started. That woman in white had firmly subdued the great shaman of Dark Court. The battle of the duo moved from the ground to the high skies. Lord Shaman was constantly on the retreat and battered. An extremely terrifying scene appeared above the sky. Lord Shaman held the scepter of dark judgment in his hands and aimed it straight up at the sky. A spine-chilling black divine light immediately pierced through the sky and penetrated the area. Ever since the appearance of the God's continent, the essence of the relics had spread to and enveloped the original realm, causing the sky over the original realm to fortify and become hard to break through by even the strongest cultivators. Yet, at this moment, the scepter of dark judgment had just broken the sky, resulting in a horrifying black hole. Black divine light gushed in from the opposite side, causing the entire upper sky to turn dark. The sky was pitch black against the shocking blood-red light of the scepter. An enormous figure emerged from within the darkness. He looked like a divine being and was Lord Shaman transformed. He's borrowing the powers of the gods. The cultivators of the Dark Court felt their hearts race. Looking toward the darkness, several altars had appeared there, and the transformed Lord Shaman was in the center of them. These altars seemed to have come from the dark world. Above the sky, what sounded like ancient ritual chanting emerged from the darkness. Did be nervous, /B? The cultivators of the Dark Court were nervous as they witnessed all these happenings. To think that Lord Shaman had been forced by the woman in white to the extent that he had to summon the dark deity through ancient sacrificial rituals. This was even the first time they had seen Lord Shaman resort to such means. He had never done so a single time before. Be careful, many people on the ground muttered. They were all on high alert at the frightening vibes they felt from the sky. Although the battle had relocated higher up, those on the ground still trembled in fear. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. Few thanks. Darkness shrouded the entire area, and the people on the ground were becoming anxious. The aura that seeped out was too terrifying, as if the dark deity himself had come to destroy the whole world. Kill! From above the sky, the chanting voices called out this chilling command, and hundreds of millions of blood-red divine lights descended into the darkness as if the powers of dark judgment were hanging from the sky. Be careful, someone shouted from below. They had all felt an intense, threatening sensation. Futian appeared in the sky above the cultivators. He stretched out his hands, and the intimidating wheel of space formed over him. The blood-red divine lights rained down in a flash, and Futian felt that it seemed like even the wheel of space was not able to devour the force of their attacks and would be penetrated. The lights had already made a hole in the wheel of space and now aimed for him. Boom! The jade-green divine light in Futian's body glowed brightly, and energy from the great path continued gushing rapidly into the wheel to intercept the black lights of judgment. Other areas, however, were not as fortunate. Except for where the strongest cultivators were, many cultivators had been stabbed by the blood-red judgment lights and died on the spot. They had no chance to retaliate at all. Even the cultivators from the Dark Court had to defend themselves against the force of the attacks. They were startled by what was happening. No one knew if it was a good thing that the Dark Court got embroiled in this battle. Things had quite gotten out of hand. They looked toward where the attacks of the judgment lights were concentrated and saw the woman in white release a monstrous fighting spirit. She was girded with a war god's armor, and though the judgment lights fell upon her, they could not get past her defense and were shut out. However, the attack had shown itself a threat. "What are you doing?" Just then, a few figures emerged from within the darkness and came over to the area. Many people looked over to where the voice came from. Beneath the blood-red divine lights, one could vaguely make out yet more arrivals from the Dark Court, with their leader shockingly being the Reaper. As usual, she was cloaked from head to toe and gave off an intense air of mystery as nobody knew her real appearance. "You arrived just in time. The cultivators from Ziwei Imperial Palace have killed our younger brother and the leader of the Infernal Divine Clan. Go and avenge them," Lord Shaman commanded Yi Qingyao and the others who were there as he looked down to the ground. To be calm, /B, death will emanated from and surrounded Yi Qingyao's body. It was immensely threatening, but it did not head toward Yi Futian and the rest. Instead, it went where Lord Shaman was. "Stop." Yi Qingyao's words caused Lord Shaman to frown. He replied, "You intend to betray the Dark Court for old friends?" Chapter 2746 on Opposing Sides. Lord Shaman was the great shaman of the Dark Court, second in place only to Dark Lord, and was held in high esteem within the Dark Court. Everyone considered him the heir of Dark Lord. However, he had never become complacent. He was keenly aware that he had slowly but surely arrived at his current position. Even if he had conspired to assassinate his big brother in the past, Dark Lord had not punished him harshly despite being furious. After killing his big brother, he had become the first in line behind Dark Lord. He knew Dark Lord's ambitions and held him in high regard as his master. Dark Lord desired to see darkness encapsulate the land and fall on the entire world. He wanted every corner of the world to be living in darkness, without rules and without order. Therefore, the Dark Court itself was also anarchy, not constrained by rules and order. It advocated the survival of the fittest. The cultivators in the Dark Court all had unique personalities, and Lord Shaman knew that he and his master were similar types of people. He had been practicing the dark arts all along and had always strived to do his best to obtain his master's approval. This was probably the only dream that he had been passionate about since he was young. Yet, he had never achieved it even once. He thought the Dark Lord had no favorites. He desired a world of darkness with no standards and order. Then, Yi Qingyao showed up. Yi Qingyao was destined to be in the darkness from birth. She was called the new child of darkness and belonged here. Master Dark Lord had high hopes for her, and Lord Shaman understood why. The Dark Lord knew that Yi Qingyao was a person capable of bringing darkness into the world. However, what Lord Shaman could not accept was how differently Master Dark Lord treated Yi Qingyao compared to the others. His master had never been concerned about anyone. Still, he would take excellent care of Yi Qingyao, granting her many privileges, to the extent that no one in Dark Court dared to lay a finger on Yi Qingyao. Someone once did and faced tragic consequences. Due to this apparent preferential treatment, many in the Dark Court felt that Yi Qingyao was the appointed heir of the Dark Lord and the true child of darkness. Even if she had been snatched from Yi Futian, the master had not minded in the least, as if he firmly believed that she would eventually bring about darkness to the world. Thus, Yi Qingyao's position was unshakable in the Dark Court. Her status was equal to the 3 dark sages and superior to the possessor of the Dark Throne and many other top cultivators. Of course, Yi Qingyao did not let Dark Lord down. She was definitely born of the dark. In contrast to the other cultivators, she could already endanger the lives of those on the level of the Renhuang Plain without a need to train. Some people said that she was the reincarnation of the Reaper. There were many rumors about Yi Qingyao in the dark world. The majority did not even know that she was female but only knew that the cloaked, mysterious child of darkness would bring darkness and death into the world. Yi Qingyao was given the title of Reaper. Lord Shaman was jealous of Yi Qingyao. No one would guess that the leader of the 3 sages, the great shaman of the Dark Court, would ever be jealous of anyone as he was so highly ranked. Yet all that had happened today was due to his jealousy. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. Few thanks. This was not a coincidence. But orders he had sent out led to the conflict breaking out between the Dark World and Ziwei Imperial Palace. He wanted the people of Dark World to find out where Yi Qingyao's heart really lay, especially his master. She did not belong to the darkness. Yi Qingyao exposed a pair of jet-black eyes from under her cloak. She looked up at Lord Shaman. She was known as the Child of Darkness, and she did indeed have an extremely dark side to her. However, for her, Yi Futian was the only light. If the Dark Court wanted to take down Yi Futian, she would stand on the side of her only light and not belong to the darkness anymore. You can continue. Yi Qingyao's voice was cold. She actually asked Lord Shaman to continue. She then looked at the surrounding cultivators and stated, "All those from the Dark World are not allowed to lift a finger." Lord Shaman stared at Yi Qingyao upon hearing her words. Her raspy voice hid an unmistakable command, and the cultivators were perturbed by it. "As the great shaman of the Dark Court, I command all of you. Show no mercy to anyone of Ziwei Imperial Palace. Kill them all," Lord Shaman said coldly. His voice rang through the area, and he continued, "Yi Qingyao, you too have to obey the will of darkness." As he was speaking, he held out the scepter of dark judgment. The blood-red divine light shone down as if he represented the will of darkness. The cultivators of the Dark World were caught in a dilemma. They never expected such a situation to happen. The great shaman of the Dark Court, Lord Shaman, had pitted himself against the Reaper. If they went by ranking, the great shaman would take precedence. Only the Dark Lord ranked above him, and he placed first in the Dark Court. As for their skill levels, the same applied. Even Dark Flame Sage and Dark Saint, the remaining two of the three Dark Sages, were no match for him. However, his opponent was Yi Qingyao, who everyone in the Dark Court knew was the current favorite of the Dark Lord, and who would possibly become his future heir. Not too long ago, Yi Qingyao inherited the will of Azura. Even if they left out the possibility that she would become the future Dark Lord one day, she was still a challenging opponent that not many would be able to handle. How could they pay the price of angering Yi Qingyao? Dark Flame Sage and Dark Saint were also present and felt somewhat awkward. It seemed like Lord Shaman held a rather large grudge against Yi Qingyao. Rifts were inevitable given how both of them were heirs of the Dark Court, and it was up to anyone's guess how things would turn out in the future. Seeing no one move to carry out his order, Lord Shaman felt embarrassed. Numerous blood-red beams of light rained down, and he coldly commanded again, "Did no one hear what I said?" As he finished speaking, lights of judgment fell from the sky, and all at once, many cultivators from the Dark Court and Dark World stepped out. They were naturally afraid of Lord Shaman. They were no strangers to his ways and figured that if they disobeyed him, they might not be able to make it out alive. In addition, their death would have been meaningless. "You'll die if you dare move." Yi Qingyao spat out a warning in a chilling voice. As she spoke, a strand of death will enclose the area, and the cultivators who had stepped out sensed a strong aura of death. At that moment, they knew that going against Yi Qingyao meant that they would die on the spot upon activation of her will. They froze mid-step, stuck in limbo. The surrounding cultivators were also stunned by what they had just seen. Who would have thought that the two giants of the Dark Court would end up being on opposing sides? Chapter 27, 47a Stubborn Personality. Kill them. Lord Shaman ordered a second time. A murderous intent enveloped the cultivators from the Dark World. It seemed as if they would be killed immediately if they did not obey his orders. Poor things. The watching cultivators all felt sorry for those from the Dark World. They were stuck having to choose between two impossible choices. One was the great shaman, and the other, the Reaper. Both were people they could not afford to offend. Both were people capable of killing all of them. Die if you do. Die if you don't. The options available to them all led to death with zero chance of surviving. But truthfully, even if the strongest cultivators of the Dark World agreed to help out in the battle, would they be good enough to kill Yi Futian? Seeing how things stood currently, it was a tall order. The Dark World may have more cultivators, but going by overall prowess, Ziwei Imperial Palace did not lose out at all. The woman in white could take on Lord Shaman by herself and even force Lord Shaman to summon the help of a deity to keep up with her. Aside from Lord Shaman, who else could take on Yi Futian? The leader of Infernal Divine Clan had been killed not long ago. Perhaps the other two of the three Dark Sages. But would Dark Flame Sage and Dark Saint follow Lord Shaman's orders? Besides, Ziwei Imperial Palace also had Supreme Swordlord on its side. And if that was not enough, Yushang from the Devil World was also lying in wait for a prime opportunity. In this battle of the finest, who was stronger? In this setting, just what could the cultivators of the Dark World possibly do to kill Yi Futian? Yet Lord Shaman had given this order. His objective was not to kill Yi Futian, but to drive those from the Dark World to their graves. The spine-chilling blood-red light was already shining upon the cultivators of the Dark World. Some moved, causing Yi Qingyao to react, but Yi Futian stopped her. "Allow me, Qingyao." He could see that Lord Shaman and Yi Qingyao were not on good terms, probably because Yi Qingyao had shaken Lord Shaman standing in the Dark Court. Yet even before he had lifted a finger, the cultivators who stepped out were blanketed from head to toe in the death will. Their rigid bodies dropped straight down to the ground. There was no chance of survival, and they died immediately. What on earth? Many of the cultivators turned to look at Yi Qingyao in shock. The death will was horrifying, able to kill without a trace. They had not even seen Yi Qingyao lift a finger, and those who walked out were already dead. Their lives were taken. Just what kind of ability was this? The Reaper. They recalled Yi Qingyao's other name. She had been given the name of Reaper, and seeing what just happened, she certainly lived up to her name. Yi Futian was surprised too. He had not thought that Yi Qingyao would have reacted so quickly. These people were not a threat to him at all. The reason Lord Shaman had been so adamant on them going up against him was so that Yi Qingyao would be forced to make a move, and in so doing, reveal whose side she was on. She would then be branded as a traitor of the Dark Court. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. Few thanks. Lord Shaman could then use that against her. Yi Qingyao's actions had undoubtedly given Lord Shaman something to hold over her. As expected, on seeing Yi Qingyao make a move, Lord Shaman's eyes glowed blood-red as he stared at the cultivators below who had been killed. "Yi Qingyao, I see you had no qualms betraying the Dark Court for an outsider." Yi Qingyao's expression beneath her cloak was calm as can be, without any perturbation, but she did not defend herself. She definitely could not have made a move, but she did and killed those people. Lord Shaman wanted to force her to pick a side. She could have decided not to pick one, but she did, letting everyone know where she stood. If she had to choose between the Dark Court and Yi Futian, she would have no hesitation at all. This was her volition. She intended to tell this to everyone in the Dark World and the Dark Lord. This was where her bottom line lay. Dark Flame Sage, Hua Yunting, what do you guys think? Lord Shaman looked toward Dark Flame Sage and Dark Saint, asking, "Let's leave things as they are for now. We'll go back and consult Dark Lord." Dark Saint Hua Yunting replied. Only the Dark Lord could decide this matter. Although Lord Shaman's intentions were not pure, Yi Qingyao had also behaved poorly. "Sure," Lord Shaman agreed. "Yi Qingyao has betrayed the Dark Court. From now on, all current privileges will be taken from her. The punishment will be decided on after we report to Master." If it had been another person, Lord Shaman would have dealt with them on the spot and killed them. But as it was Yi Qingyao whom the Dark Lord was extremely protective of, without his orders, no one in the Dark Court dared to lay a finger on her, even Lord Shaman. "Retreat," Lord Shaman ordered. At once, the frightening aura dissipated from the area. He turned around and went off, with the others following in suit, bringing the corpses with them. In the sky, Ling Long turned around to look at Yi Futian with a questioning look on her face. "Come back here," Yi Futian said. Ling Long headed back toward the ground and landed beside Yi Futian. "Elder brother, I'll go back first," Yi Qingyao shouted to Yi Futian. Her clear voice shocked everyone as they realized that the Reaper was a girl, and she was even Yi Futian's younger sister. She did not hesitate to betray the Dark Court for Yi Futian and kill those cultivators of the Dark World. "Be careful." Yi Futian nodded. Yi Qingyao left with the cultivators of the Dark World. There were still many strong warriors by her side. Yi Futian naturally understood Yi Qingyao's status after witnessing the events. If Lord Shaman could get rid of her quickly, he would not have gone to such extents. Dark Flame Sage and Dark Saint were on the fence and sided with no one. Yi Qingyao's position in the Dark Court was exceptional. Just that, today's happenings might result in a bit of trouble for Yi Qingyao. The cultivators were still reeling as the battle came to an end. Ziwei Imperial Palace did not lose out at all during today's battle. At the same time, the Dark Court suffered a significant loss with the demise of a giant of the Dark World, the leader of Infernal Divine Clan, and the clan's dissolution. On the other hand, the cultivators from Ziwei Imperial Palace suffered not a single loss. Supreme Swordlord put away his will and came to Yi Futian's side. That lass is thoughtful. She killed them on purpose. Yeah. Yi Futian nodded. Obviously, he knew that. This time around, the people who had died were no ordinary people. They included the direct disciple of the Dark Lord and will most likely attract his attention. If you had continued killing, you might incur his rage. She did this so she could protect you. If the Dark Lord wanted to do anything to you, he would have to get past her first, or she would betray the Dark World, Supreme Swordlord reasoned. She isn't scared of Lord Shaman but worried that the Dark Lord would take you on personally. This lass is still as stubborn as when she was young. Yi Futian looked toward the disappearing voices. She probably wanted to let everyone know that if the Dark World desired to have the Reaper, they could not lay a single finger on Yi Futian. Chapter 27:48 An Invitation from the Dark Court. After the cultivators from the Dark World left, the other cultivators that were around also left. Many people were awed. Ziwei Imperial Palace currently had a battle prowess just as strong as the Emperor's. At least, it was so for the top stratum. Of course, when compared with the whole of the Dark World, the gap was still rather wide. There were still many other powerful figures in the Dark World, and they had made progress in the relics, like the ancient God clan from the Divine Prefecture. If the Dark Lord commanded all the forces in the Dark World to assemble and attack Ziwei Imperial Palace together, Ziwei Imperial Palace might not withstand the battle. But yet again, the cultivators in Ziwei Imperial Palace had made tremendous progress in a short amount of time. If given a bit more time, how much further would they have improved? Once Yi Futian entered the Imperial realm and became an emperor, the world would have gained her 8th superpower. Yet, the path to becoming a great emperor was not easily conquered. Yi Futian would probably require many more years before he reaches that stage. From the beginning, many great cultivators had been chasing this dream. Yet how many had succeeded? Of course, with all the changes that had taken place in the world, the chances of achieving emperor level had significantly increased. This world was headed for a revolution. From among Lord Shaman, Yin Gi, Dugu Wuxia, Di Hao, Ji Wudao, Yi Futian, and others more, who would be the first to reach their goal? Or would it be another more senior cultivator? Fang Xiyuan moved beside Yi Futian. He slightly lowered his head. Master, I was wrong, he admitted. Do you really think that you were in the wrong? Yi Futian questioned Fang Xiyuan. Fang Xiyuan raised his head to look at Yi Futian. Upon seeing Yi Futian's expression, he realized that his master knew him too well. Obviously, he still did not think that he was wrong to have killed his opponent. After all, it was the Dark Court who first started killing. They had also wanted to plunder their imperial arms, and if they did not kill them, they would have been killed. Just that, it resulted in an extremely unfortunate consequence, and brought trouble unto his master and Ziwei Imperial Palace when he offended the Dark Court. Many years ago, Third Brother taught me that there were many ways of reasoning in this world, but no matter how good the reasoning, it was still no match for a fist. Of course, there was nothing wrong with what you all did. If anything, it would be that we of Ziwei Imperial Palace are not as strong as the Dark Court, Yi Futian counseled. It was commonplace for people in the cultivation world to use their fighting abilities to settle all matters. If they had not displayed their prowess today, Lord Shaman would not have let them off but carried out a massacre instead. What's done is done. Go back and practice more, Yi Futian dismissed him. Yes, master. Fang Xiyuan nodded. Indeed, he would have to get better. If not, master would have to bear the consequences if he got into trouble in the future. The cultivators from Ziwei Imperial Palace had all left and returned to Yi Imperial Palace. They had stirred up quite a bit of disturbance. The current Ziwei Imperial Palace was no longer just an ordinary existence. and their confrontation with the Dark Court must have gained quite a bit of attention. If the great emperors were not in the picture, Ziwei Imperial Palace was a force capable of shaking things up within the Seven Realms. The following days went by like normal. For the Dark Court, the betrayal of the Reaper was enough to get the attention of the Dark Lord. Unfortunately, this matter would have to be reported to the Dark Sovereign. The days passed one by one as Futian continued training quietly. He wished to break through the shackles soon. It had been years since he had got stuck and had not been able to make progress for a long time. Of course, this was only in Futian's mind. Many cultivators had been stuck on this plane even longer than his combined practicing years. There were even more who had not been able to move past this stage their entire lives. Many of the top cultivators had only been able to succeed after the appearance of the divine relics. That Futian was able to get near this stage so quickly was due to his inborn talents and the gift of fate and luck. The divine ruler he had attained at the shrine of the Karura had helped him along this path. Futian stood on the sky stairwell within Imperial Palace while Old Ma told him something. Futian looked toward the distance, and soon a group of figures slowly approached them. They were cultivators from the Dark Court, and at their head was impressively the Dark Saint Hua Yunting. Hua Yunting looked up at the sky stairwell. Standing on the sky stairwell, he was surprised to sense a solemn will. He lifted his foot and started to climb up the stairwell. An aura leaked from his body as if it intended to weaken the pressure imposed by the sky stairwell. As one of the highest-ranking characters in the Dark World, he could not afford to let himself be seen as weak over here. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. Few thanks. Futian quietly stood at the top and watched Hua Yunting climb up, step by step. He did not move, but just watched quietly, although he still exerted an invisible form of pressure. The both of them could be counted as acquaintances, but as the other party was from the Dark Court, Imperial Palace's authority must be exerted. Imperial Palace had Imperial in its name, although he had yet to become an emperor. Even so, when cultivators below the emperor level came here, it was imperative to let them be aware of Imperial Palace's might, no matter who they were. Finally, Hua Yunting reached the top of the sky stairwell but was stopped by Old Ma before he could continue. Hua Yunting frowned and looked at Futian. Please go ahead, Dark Saint. Futian gestured him to come over. At once, the invisible pressure vanished. Hua Yunting glanced at Futian and made his way over. He stood opposite Futian and said, Lord Shaman reported to the Dark Lord about what happened that day, and Yi Qingyao was summoned back to the Dark Court. You probably were able to tell that this issue was started by the Dark Court. I could even say that it was to target Qingyao. The Dark Lord most likely would have realized that too, Futian replied. This does not matter. The fact of the matter is that Yi Qingyao was willing to betray the Dark Court for you. She purposely openly showed her affiliation, which is a threat to the Dark Lord, Hua Yunting countered. And so? Futian looked at the other. What did you come find me for? The Dark Sovereign ordered me to invite you over to the Dark Court, Dark Saint answered, causing Futian to be taken aback. Why would the Dark Sovereign invite him to the Dark Court? Old Ma beside him was frowning deeply. He looked at Futian with worry. He obviously felt that Futian should not go with them. How can I be sure that this was from the Dark Sovereign and not from you guys? Futian asked. Hua Yunting took out a dark jade slip and handed it over to Futian. Futian infused his consciousness within and was soon able to make out a presence that led to the appearance of an image of the Dark Sovereign. He was standing on the Dark Temple and conveying his order. Hua Yunting definitely would not be able to feign such an authoritative and divine air as that. This is the order conveyed to me by the Dark Sovereign, Hua Yunting started. As for whether you wish to follow it or not is up to you. Although we both know each other, if the Dark Sovereign wanted to finish you guys off, there would be no need for him to go to such trouble. We can disregard what happened before, but in the future, we hope that you will not choose to stand on the opposing side of the Dark Court. After he had finished talking, Hua Yunting left. This time, he flew through the sky instead, with the other cultivators from the Dark Court following after him. Chapter 27, 49, A Tyrant. After Hua Yunting left, Old Ma said to Futian, You definitely must not go. That was the dark world. It had no law and order, and once Futian went, his life was no longer in his hands. Futian looked at Hua Yunting's disappearing figure thoughtfully. Why would the Dark Lord invite him over? This was different from the time when he went to the Devil World. That time, Yusheng was in danger, but the Devil Emperor and Yusheng had connections, after all. Besides, although it was still dangerous, he had not formed any enmity with the Devil World yet. The Dark World was completely different. He had killed the direct disciple of the Dark Lord and many other cultivators. Yi Qingyao could betray the Dark Court for him. He also wholly lacked knowledge about the Dark Lord. If he decided to proceed, it would be much more dangerous than when he had gone to the Devil World. Furthermore, from what he could see, the Devil World still had a system of law and order and was strict on them. The 100 million inhabitants of the Devil World had great respect for the Devil Emperor. It might not be the case for the Dark World. Just that, if he did not go, what might the Dark Lord do to Yi Qingyao? Why would the Dark Lord invite him over? A few figures came flashing past and landed on the sky stairwell. They said to Futian, "You must not go." Obviously, they all did not wish for Futian to risk his life in the Dark Court. In the past, the Dark World had carried out a massive massacre in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path that had resulted in the cultivators of the original realm forming a very bad impression of the Dark World. It was cruel and murderous, and the ruler of the Dark World, the Dark Lord, was said to be a cold-blooded tyrant as well. He killed without feelings and made it to his current position by stepping over countless bodies to conquer the Dark World. The Dark Lord of the Dark Court had the worst reputation among the 6 emperors. He had no regard for any and all life. "Master, this whole thing was caused by me. If you insist on going, please bring me along. I will bear the responsibility." Fang Siyuan stood before Futian and bowed. Futian replied, "Don't think so much. You just happened to get caught up with this matter. If it weren't you, it would be some other from Ziwei Imperial Palace. Luckily it was you. If not, our own might have died instead." Although what happened before was caused by Fang Siyuan, he was not their target. It would have happened with or without him. But Fang Siyuan wanted to say more, but Futian waved his hand to dismiss him. "Go and practice. Don't make so much fuss for nothing. I will consider it carefully and will not go if I am not confident in my chances." Everyone was still somewhat worried after hearing Futian's words. They understood him. If no one was involved, they knew that he would take every precaution. But this involved Yi Qingyao, and knowing how much Futian cared for the people around him, there was definitely the possibility that he would disregard the risk and go. "Please stay, Sword Lord. I need to discuss some issues about cultivation with you." "The rest may go," Futian urged as he saw that everyone seemed reluctant to leave. They left at once, constantly turning back to look at Futian. After they left, Futian guided Sword Lord to the cultivation ground at the back of the palace. He asked, "Sword Lord, do you have to know anything about the Dark World?" "Yes." Supreme Sword Lord nodded slightly. "I don't wish for you to go as well. The Dark World is an anarchy. Of course, I'm not worried that you might be in danger if you go to the Dark World. After all, at your current level, except for the emperors, very few can pose a threat to you. You should be able to move around the realms without much trouble. But the Dark World is a different story in that its lack of law and order was brought forth by its own ruler. Where you are going, the ruler of the Dark World is the Dark Lord, and he has been called the Dark Tyrant." "Tyrant," Futian murmured to himself. No wonder everyone wanted to stop him from going. However, this tyrant seemed to show favoritism toward Yi Qingyao. "From what I know, Lord Shaman inherited the position of the Great Shaman because he assassinated his senior. He then became the leader of the 3 Dark Sages, but the Dark Lord did not pursue matters," Supreme Sword Lord continued. "If you plan to go, I'll say that there are too many uncertainties. Once you enter the Dark Court, things will not be up to you any longer." But has Sword Lord ever considered that since the Dark Lord is known as a tyrant, he fears nothing? If he wanted me killed, he could just come here and finish me off. He doesn't need to waste so much time to invite me there, Futian reasoned. "I don't think it will be too hard for someone like him." "What you said makes sense too, but the Dark World is his territory, after all. The The Dark Lord is somewhat restrained by the other emperors and cannot just come here and incite matters on a whim. Don't forget that when God's continent first appeared, the 6 emperors appeared simultaneously and set the rule that they would not interfere with what happened on this continent. If the Dark Lord came, then the others could follow suit too. Supreme Swordlord had his own reasoning as well. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. Few thanks. That's true. Yi Futian nodded. That makes sense too. I will consider more. Yes, please do. Supreme Swordlord nodded and bade him farewell. After Supreme Swordlord left, Yi Futian sat alone, thinking. Hua Jieyu came by and told him, if you intend to go, you must be vigilant at all times. I know. Yi Futian laughed and nodded his head. It seemed like it was still Hua Jieyu who understood him the most. Don't worry about matters here. I will maintain contact with Yu Sheng. If you run into any trouble in the Dark Court, I will let Yi Imperial Palace team up with Yu Sheng to stage war against the Dark Court, Hua Jieyu continued. But you must ensure that Ling Long listens to me. Yi Futian laughed and nodded again. Ling Long possessed part of his will, so there would be no problems on this end. Obviously, he did not plan to bring Ling Long along on this trip as there was no reason to. As for everything else, he could handle without Ling Long. Yi Futian made some arrangements in the Imperial Palace and also accepted Hua Jieyu's recommendation that if he ran into any danger in the Dark Court, it would be a good idea to use the cultivators from the Dark Court here as duress. If that really happened, the Devil World and the Dark World would become enemies. This would definitely not be a good thing for the Dark World when they were supposed to have shared a common enemy. After he had finished making arrangements, Yi Futian left the Imperial Palace by himself. He came to where the Dark World was situated, and there remained a beam of light in the sky. It was the link between both places, linking the Dark World to the God's continent, not only here, but the other realms as well. There were still cultivators walking in and out of the passageway, making their way to the world below. Yi Futian's figure glowed, and he entered one of the links. However, he was headed up and immediately went into the passage that led to the Dark Ward. Subsequently, his body vanished from the area. Chapter 27, 50 Lord Yellow Spring. The reality of the Dark World was a little different from what Yi Futian had imagined. He thought the Dark World was like the hell described in legends, shrouded in total darkness. However, the world in front of him was no different from the Divine Prefecture at this moment. However, that was not what the Devil World looked like when he entered the Devil World. Terrifying clouds of catastrophe shrouded the entire Devil World, which was located under the Devil Abyss. Nevertheless, Yi Futian was only surprised for a second, as he then moved forward, traveled by air, and headed in a certain direction. At this moment, he had no idea where he was. Like the Divine Prefecture, the Dark World was extremely expansive and had many domains. Among them, top cultivators were, without exception, gathered in the most important areas of the Dark World. For example, Yellow Spring Sea, Hell Realm, Nether Valley, Infernal Mountain, and places such as those were considered the center of the Dark World. And the most core area of the Dark World was in the center, surrounded by these regions. Once crossing over these areas, one may reach Azura City. The end of Azura City was where the Dark Court was located. The regional composition of the Dark World was vastly different from that of the Divine Prefecture. The strongest forces were concentrated in a larger area surrounding the Dark Court. Of course, there were also many forbidden zones, some extremely dangerous places, and some extraordinary characters in other parts of the Dark World. After Yi Futian familiarized himself with the situation inside, he hurried in the direction of Azura City. Although he was inside the Dark World, no one dared to provoke Yi Futian along the way. After all, Yi Futian's temperament was noticeably exceptional. Although he did not release a strong aura outward, top cultivators would often form an invisible atmosphere around themselves. They deliberately kept it under control. Otherwise, cultivators in higher realms would be able to sense this invisible coercion. When a certain realm of cultivation was reached, the perception of the cultivator was highly elevated as well. As Yi Futian kept on his way, he finally came to the core of the Dark World and entered the domain of the Yellow Spring Sea. The Yellow Spring Sea was not some ordinary body of water. This watery region was the real yellow spring that could corrode someone's body and spiritual soul. Death was imminent with just one touch. Anyone unfortunate enough to fall into the yellow spring would die with no body left to be retrieved, and their souls lost forever. According to legend, this Yellow Spring Sea formation started when the great Emperor Yellow Spring perished in primordial times. When he fell, the blood that flowed out from his body turned into what was now known as the Yellow Spring Sea. Of course, nowadays, in the dark world, many cultivators regarded the Yellow Spring Sea as a place of cultivation. They cultivated the power of the Yellow Spring here and turned it into a unique power of the Great Path, the strength of which was immensely horrific. Futian was rushing into the space above the Yellow Spring Sea. His perception was powerful enough to keenly perceive the terrible power contained within the body of water below. Even he could not help but admire the amazing sights of the world. At this moment, a flash appeared in Futian's eyes, and he looked amid the Yellow Spring Sea and saw a fluctuation of power somewhere in the Yellow Spring. Someone seemed to be inside. Afterward, the Yellow Spring Sea was in an uproar, and a terrifying cyclone manifested and rolled towards Futian extremely quickly. This area of the ocean rampaged and seemed to want to engulf Futian. Futian was surrounded by divine light as he shuttled in the storm that savaged this area of the ocean. His speed was as fast as lightning. But at this moment, the power of the Yellow Spring gathered into a gigantic figure, like some deity from the Yellow Spring. This giant of the Yellow Spring overlooked Futian and where he was. Futian appeared to be extremely insignificant in front of him. The violent storm in this region tossed and turned as the waves behind him also rushed into the sky, covering this corner of the world, shrouding Futian under this Yellow Spring, with nowhere to run. Then the hands of that gigantic figure stretched out to grab Futian. Futian was surrounded by divine light, and his body suddenly turned into a golden body, just like the golden body of the Buddha. Radiant Buddhist runes shone upon the golden body so that when the arms reached out from the Yellow Spring to grab at him, they were smashed directly under the golden Buddhist runes and turned into nothingness. With a turning of Futian's mind, countless golden Buddhist runes flew out instantly, and the force of Yellow Spring that came at him was smashed immediately, disappearing into ashes and dust. Even that massive figure that emerged from the Yellow Spring was exploding like crazy and then just vanished. All kinds of commotion suddenly stopped on the surface of the sea as an aura escaped into the distance. Futian's eyes seemed to have turned into a golden color as he glanced over that way. Then, his body was gone in a flash and disappeared as a golden divine light, carrying the golden body and dove into the Yellow Spring Sea. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. Few thanks. Moments later, when Futian reappeared in the sky above the sea, someone was caught up in the golden arm. It was an old man, a cultivator at the peak Renhuang level. He looked at Futian and said in horror, "Sir, please have mercy." He was indescribably shocked. This cultivator, who had come to the Yellow Spring Sea, was a disciple of Buddhism, and yet he roamed in the center of the dark world. This was undoubtedly the equivalent of committing suicide. The dark world and the Buddhist world had always been at odds with one another, and their powers were on opposite sides. The divine light of Buddhism illuminated the space, directly covering the opponent within its bound. All of a sudden, the old man looked shocked and declared loudly, "I am the disciple of Lord Yellow Spring. If you kill me, there will be consequences later." Boom! The Buddha's divine flame continued to burn, and the man screamed immediately. His body incinerated into nothing under the burning flames. Someone who could not tolerate the slightest disagreement and unleashed deadly attacks simply because of it would naturally be undeserving of his consideration and mercy. He would only pay them back tenfold more. Instantaneously, his opponent's body disappeared, and Futian continued on his way. However, before Futian could get too far, the Yellow Spring Sea raged again, and this time, the perimeter of its violence extended even further. Futian stopped and looked at the tumbling and roaring sea. Then, a group of cultivators appeared on the sea surface, and every one of them was a top Renhuang figure. In the distance, a cultivator of the tribulation plane appeared and stood in the void. It was a young man clad in a yellow garment. He was the eldest disciple of Lord Yellow Spring, cultivator of Buddhism. The young man stared at Futian. The will of Yellow Spring shot out from his eyes. "Get out of the way." Futian walked forward towards where they were without any intention of stopping. The other could sense that faint aura emitting from Futian and thought that as a merely Renhuang cultivator, what did Futian have that could warrant such display of arrogance? "You asked for it," the other man concluded coldly, the terrifying will of the Yellow Spring blooming from him. Futian continued moving forward, and the young man was about to take action. "Stop!" A great shout was heard, which shook the Yellow Spring. "Get back, all of you!" An indifferent voice came through the void, and everyone's expression changed slightly. They turned their heads to look at Lord Yellow Spring, who has arrived, a little puzzled. Lord Yellow Spring's eyes were fixed upon Futian. He thought to himself, this man has actually come to the dark world. "Get back!" After Lord Yellow Spring chided coldly again, these cultivators finally backed away and did as they were told. Futian continued walking forward and through the crowd. He only stopped when he reached Lord Yellow Spring. He said, "Come with me." Having said that, he continued to walk forward. Lord Yellow Spring was somewhat stunned by this request, but still, he followed Futian as asked. Chapter 2751. A place outside the world. The people under Lord Yellow Spring's command were shocked by what they saw at first, and then they broke out in cold sweat. They realized that they had almost died at Yellow Spring. Their master, Lord Yellow Spring, was treating this man so respectfully. They could only imagine that the other man was definitely someone they couldn't afford to offend. That was a close call. They trembled in their hearts as they stared at the departing figures. Who was this white-haired young man that even their master had to be so humble in front of? Futian continued making his way forward, Lord Yellow Spring trailing behind him. Then Futian, who was in front, suddenly asked, "How much do you know about the Dark Lord?" The surprise on Lord Yellow Spring's face showed that he was caught by surprise. He replied, "I dare not make conjectures regarding my lord." He was silent, with a look of awe and fear in his eyes. Clearly, he didn't dare say anything. This was the dark world. Even if no one was around, it was best not to make unnecessary comments. Or else, the slightest carelessness might attract disaster with fatal consequences. "Speak," Futian spat, and his tone was ice-cold with an undeniable sense of authority. Lord Yellow Spring's expression was not very pleased because he did not dare to speak of the Dark Lord at will. However, at this moment, Futian was right next to him. If he continued to hesitate, who knew if Futian would turn on him instead? The Dark Lord rules the dark world, which was respected and feared by all. Although I cultivate in Yellow Spring, I have no chance to contact my lord at all. Even those who cultivate in the Dark Court proper have few opportunities to be in direct contact with my lord. Lord Yellow Spring continued, "The Dark Lord's status is most supreme, and within the court, only those who are in the centermost core may be in touch with him." "Does the Dark Lord care about anyone?" Futian asked. Lord Yellow Spring looked at Futian and wondered what his purpose in asking this question was. Why would he want to know about the person the Dark Lord cared about? "As far as I know, the Dark Lord doesn't care much about anyone or anything. The only thing he cares about is for darkness to descend across all of the world." Lord Yellow Spring added, "My lord is the darkness incarnate." Futian was quiet for a moment and thought that this was similar to what Supreme Swordlord had told him. Indeed, this lord of the dark world resembled a cold-blooded tyrant who wanted to bring darkness to the world. What he represented was the will of darkness. However, in this area, at the junction of Hell's Yellow Spring and Infernal Mountain, there is an island, and on that island resides a mistress. According to rumors, she may have some connection to the Dark Lord. "Perhaps you can go and take a look," said Lord Yellow Spring. Futian turned his head and stared at Lord Yellow Spring. The icy look that was coming from him seemed to pierce into the other man's mind. Nevertheless, Lord Yellow Spring did not avoid his eyes, but returned the look directly. "Who?" Futian asked. "What is her relationship with the Dark Lord?" "You'll know when you get there. It seems to be a totally different world there." Lord Yellow Spring looked at Futian and continued, When you get there, you'll understand that I am not trying to deceive you. Futian saw that the other man pledged in earnest, so he pointed his finger at the other party's brow chakra, and he looked directly into the other man's eyes. Lord Yellow Spring was quite stunned, and yet, his eyes were still trained on Futian. "Give me the location," said Futian, and divine light shot out between the brows of Lord Yellow Spring and penetrated Futian's mind. Soon after, Futian put his finger down, and with a turn of his mind, his body disappeared directly from where he was. After Futian left, Lord Yellow Spring let out a long and suppressed sigh as he relaxed his body. He watched Futian's disappearing figure. A cold light flashed across his eyes as if containing a great deal of murderous intent. Since Futian had dared to venture into the dark world, then he should prepare to die here. But just now, Futian reappeared in front of Lord Yellow Spring once again, which took Lord Yellow Spring by total surprise. His expression changed instantly to one of shock. Suddenly, there was much respect and humbleness reflected in his eyes. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. Few thanks. As I suspected, it seems that not everything you said can be believed. As soon as Futian's voice fell, he raised his hand and pointed at Lord Yellow Spring. The will upon Lord Yellow Spring erupted like mad, but he was unable to escape the prowess of this one finger. His brow chakra was directly penetrated, and his spiritual soul was shattered. There was a strong sense of fear in his eyes as he stared straight ahead. Only then did Futian's figure finally and truly disappear between heaven and earth. In the distance, when the cultivators who lagged behind finally caught up with them, they were there just in time to witness Lord Yellow Spring's body falling haplessly into the Yellow Spring Sea below. Their hearts palpitated as their hearts filled with fear. How frightening was that man? He had slain Lord Yellow Spring with just one finger. But in the next moment, they all moved in at the same time, rushing towards Lord Yellow Spring's body frantically. Those who reacted a little slower sensed something as well, so they, too, ran in the same direction quickly. On the Yellow Spring Sea, war had erupted. Futian continued to move forward, crossing the vast and endless Yellow Spring Sea, passing the terrifying abyss of the Hell Realm, and saw the black destruction inflicted by Infernal Mountain. Along the way, there were quite a few cultivators who tried to attack him, but the outcome was one and the same. They had all perished by Futian's hands without exception. However, Futian could also see the chaos that permeated this world. Although he did not blatantly broadcast his aura, it was clear that his cultivation realm was at the peak level of Runhuang no matter how restrained he was. Powerful cultivators could perceive something of his realm, yet they continued to take lethal action against him, and these were compelling individuals. Futian's experience demonstrated how chaotic it currently was in the dark world. However, even in the dark world, few could contend with Futian. Therefore, everyone who challenged him was now dead. At this time, Futian came to another region, the place where the Yellow Spring Sea and the Hell Realm intersected. The frightening Infernal Mountain could be seen looming in the distance. When standing in the sky above this area and looking at the junction, it was like standing at the entrance to the netherworld. He saw that there were several fights that broke out around him, and some were group fights with people continuing to perish as a result. In the distance, there was an area suspended above the Yellow Spring Sea. Further ahead, there was what appeared to be a continent hanging about at the entrance to the Hell Realm. Many cultivators who were fighting were approaching that direction. It seemed as if that was the place they wanted to escape to. Futian approached as well. After observing it for some time, he discovered that when the cultivators fled to the vicinity of that continent, those who gave chase would stop and dared not follow their prey there. It seemed that on that continent was something that made them extremely wary. What place is this? Futian was somewhat curious. This was the location given to him by Lord Yellow Spring. He had a feeling that Lord Yellow Spring wasn't lying to him, but the man had harbored some horrid thoughts. His figure flickered as he headed towards that continent. The surrounding space was incredibly terrifying, filled with an aura of destruction. Some cultivators watched Futian and saw him heading towards that continent, but no one approached him to do anything. Finally, Futian landed on the continent. When he fell from the sky towards the space below, The destructive currents between heaven and earth seemed to have disappeared. The horrific atmosphere of Infernal Mountain, Hell Realm, and the yellow spring sea could no longer be felt. In this chaotic world, a place seemed to have been created outside of it. Chapter 2752, Miraculous Island. This continent was not huge, but it was located in the most dangerous place in the Dark World, in the middle of all these major regions of terror. It was simply incredible that such a continent could even exist here. It was almost a place born out of a dream. After Futian came upon this continent, he found that there was no atmosphere of danger on this land. There wasn't even anyone who was engaged in fighting. Outside of the continent, the fighting was fierce and terrible, but inside, all the fighting seemed to have ceased. How was that done? Futian moved towards the area below and landed on the continent. He discovered that the cultivational realms among the cultivators on this continent varied greatly. Some were extremely powerful, and then there were some whose cultivation was quite lowly. But everyone was working very hard here. Sir, Futian was walking on the road when he encountered an old man with a young boy. The old man stopped when he heard Futian's voice. He looked at Futian with a smile and said, "How can I help you, little friend? This is my first time here, and I was a little curious. Previously, when I was on the periphery of this continent, I saw constant fighting, like those people from the outside world delight in fighting and killing. Why is it that once I arrived here, I found that this continent is completely different from the outside? It seems as if I have entered into another world." Futian asked curiously. The old man smiled and looked at Futian. "Judging from your temperament, your cultivation should be considerable, probably at the peak Renhuang. Am I correct?" Futian nodded. He could sense the old man's cultivation was very strong as well. "It seems that you are a cultivator from afar," the old man said again. "But it's rather strange. You have come all this way to Illumination Island, yet you do not know what place this is." "Indeed, I came from afar, but I was in a hurry, so I hadn't had time to inquire beforehand," Futian responded, feeling shocked inside. In the center of the Dark World, there was a place called Illumination Island? "So it is," the old man nodded. "Decades ago, I was just like the cultivators that you have seen on the outside world. After many perils of life and death, I almost died. But at the last moment, I happened upon this island, which saved my life. Since then, I have put aside the disputes and concerns of the outside world, concentrating on cultivating here instead. Illumination Island was named by the people who cultivated on this island. In this chaotic dark world, this island is probably the only source of light. This is indeed an island of miracles. It's an island surrounded by darkness, but somehow all slaughter and disputes are forbidden. Anyone who comes here is forbidden to kill. No matter the nature of the grievances, no revenge is allowed here. For many years, this place became many people's place of refuge. During this process, many ruthless people fled to this island, but held on to their true nature. Later, all of them disappeared. Over time, everyone has come to know what kind of place this is." When the old man spoke, a spark of memory flashed through his eyes. Back then, he was someone known for his brutality. But after he escaped here, he began a transformation for the better. This world shouldn't just be about darkness. Indeed, it's an island of miracles, Futian said. He could see that the old man had extraordinary cultivation, and his state of mind was exceptionally peaceful. It seemed that he was in a state of returning back to nature, which was rare and precious. "Since you are here, you can stay on the island for a few days and experience the difference between this island and the outside world. After I came to the island, I was able to step into a realm that once eluded me," the old man explained patiently to Futian. This stemmed from his current state of mind. If it were anyone else, they would probably not even bother to interact with Futian, much less explain everything to him so patiently. "I really want to experience it for myself," Futian nodded. "Since it is an island of miracles, there must be miraculous people on the island. Who is the master of this island?" "There is no master on this island." The old man suddenly became serious as he looked at Futian intently. "However, I know of whom you speak of. I hope you will not disturb her peaceful cultivation. Remember my advice." Having said that, the old man departed. Futian displayed a strange look on his face, sensing the other was unwilling to tell him something. He was treating it as a grave matter. Futian knew instinctively that the old man didn't want him to disturb the person he was inquiring about. However, Futian had made up his mind that he must go and find out. He now understood who Lord Yellowspring was referring to. At the core of the dark world was an island of light. All countless cultivators of the darkness aside, the existence of a path of light itself was already violating the will of darkness and went against the will of the Dark Lord. The meaning behind these two contradictory forces was anyone's guess. It was impossible for the Dark Lord not to know that such a place existed, yet he did nothing about it. One could only say that someone was residing on the island, and that person's relationship with the Dark Lord was rather special. Lord Yellowspring might not have lied to him about this, but still, his intention was suspicious. Lord Yellowspring likely might have sent him here to his death. Futian continued moving forward, gathering information on the island. After quite some effort, he finally got the information he needed. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. Thanks. On this miraculous island, there was a holy place known as the Holy Lake. The Holy Lake was surrounded by mountains, constantly veiled by a celestial mist. At this moment, on a small boat in the middle of the lake, a woman was quietly cultivating with her eyes closed. It was as if she was distinct from the rest of the world. The whole scene was akin to a beautiful painting. The little boat drifted slowly with the water in the lake and came to shore. There were several huts right along the shore, and when the woman returned, several little girls ran out of the huts. These little girls were innocent and playful, and their eyes were full of flawless purity. It was as if the world had not touched them. "Older sister is back." The girls rushed forward as the woman stepped ashore. She touched the little girls' heads and asked gently, "Did you study very hard?" The girls nodded emphatically, as if they wanted to show off in front of the women. Some even began reciting the content of the book as their pure and flawless voices reverberated upon the lake. Everything here was so ethereal and unadulterated that one couldn't help but feel calmness from within. Futian couldn't bear to disturb and interrupt such a peaceful scene. On the lake, Futian stood quietly on a small boat, watching the scene play out quietly in front of the huts in the distance. Over there, the woman said to the girls, "Go inside and study. I have some other business to take care of." The girls didn't ask any question but returned to their huts as were told. After they had gone back, an invisible fluctuation enveloped the huts. The woman then turned around, looking at the middle of the lake, and asked, "Anything else you want?" Futian knew that he had been discovered, and it might even be possible that when he first came to this holy lake, the other had already detected his presence. He felt that in this world, there was probably no way to escape this woman's perception. The reason why the woman was able to make this island a place outside the world, besides the possibility of her having some relationship with the Dark Lord, was her powerful strength. There was no doubt about this. At this time, Futian could not feel any aura from the woman, as she appeared just like any ordinary person with no cultivation. Futian understood very well that such a person could not possibly be ordinary. Chapter 2753 An Amazing Woman. Futian cast a scrutinizing eye at the woman. The woman was wearing a white garment that was clean and simple. Her eyes were as clear and ethereal as the water of the lake. One look into her eyes was like bathing under the moonlight in a moonlit night, and one couldn't help but feel a sense of tranquility. "I'm just taking a stroll around here. I'm sorry if I inadvertently disturbed the goddess." The boat Futian was on approached this side of the shore as he made a slight bow to the woman. Facing a woman like this, he couldn't have any bad feelings toward her. Although her beauty was not the type that would topple a kingdom, it was an ethereal beauty out of this world, pure and flawless, like a goddess not of this world, without the sully of earthly influences. "It doesn't matter. Would you like to come up and sit down?" The woman asked politely. Perhaps she was merely being hospitable and courteous, but Futian did not demur. He nodded and said, "Then, I will take the goddess's offer." As he spoke, the boat under his feet accelerated forward, followed by his figure falling gently on the shore by the lake. He glanced at the surrounding mountains and greenery. Earnestly, he said, "This is a true paradise, out of this world. The goddess cultivates here because you do not like to be disturbed by outside noise." "I'm sorry to have disturbed you." "Not at all. Other people come around here often," the woman replied calmly as she was making her way back. The fluctuations above the huts had disappeared, and the woman walked into one of them. Futian did not follow her inside but sat by the lake instead. The woman didn't seem to mind his presence, but returned to the hut to give the girls their lessons and teach them cultivation. Sitting where he was, Futian could hear the sound of reading from inside the hut. Seeing this, Futian shook his head with a wry smile. He then settled down quietly by the lake, lying down and feeling the tranquility. The sun was slightly intoxicating, and Futian immensely enjoyed this moment of rare tranquility. Slowly, he closed his eyes. He fell asleep unknowingly but peacefully. At his level of cultivation, he no longer needed to sleep. Just simple meditation could help relax and rejuvenate him. However, in this environment, he could fall into a rare state of sleep. After a long time, Futian, even in deep sleep, seemed to smell something good. His nose moved slightly, then he opened his eyes and sat up. "Big brother, older sister asked me to come and tell you it's time to eat." At this time, a little girl came to Futian and gave him a smile when she saw Futian getting up. Her voice was crystal clear, full of innocence. Futian showed a soft smile in his eyes when he saw the little girl's innocent smile and asked, "What's your name?" "My name is Chi-Chi. The older sister gave it to me," the girl said with a smile. "Chi-Chi," Futian smiled and asked, "have you always studied here?" The girl nodded. "I have been here ever since I was a kid, and I have been studying with older sister." "Big brother, come quickly, or the fish soup will be cold." As the girl spoke, she stretched out her hand to pull on Futian's arm. Futian got up with a smile, then took the girl's hand as they walked back and came to the outside of the hut. At the dining table outside the hut, the woman was serving soup to the girls and setting up the bowls and chopsticks. When she saw Futian had arrived, she said in a low voice, "Let's eat together." "Thank you." Futian nodded and sat down. The two didn't talk much. They had only exchanged a couple of sentences until now. "What's your name, big brother? Why did you come here? Did you encounter danger outside as well?" Chi-Chi asked Futian. There was a hint of curiosity in those pure and innocent eyes of hers. "My name is Futian, and it is true that I came here after having encountered a few things on the outside." Futian smiled lightly and said, "Why do you ask? Did everyone who came here have encountered dangers out there?" "In the past, many people came here because they had encountered things that could not be resolved. So they came here to ask my sister for help." Chi-Chi giggled and continued, "Older sister is awesome, and she can resolve anything. We have all been sent here by the others, looked after by older sister. I must focus on cultivation, and when I grow up, I will help others like my sister." Futian rubbed Chi-Chi's head, displaying a bright smile, and said, "Then you have to eat more so you can grow up faster. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. Few thanks." "Okay," Chi-Chi giggled. Futian also sat there quietly, drinking the soup. The woman would occasionally talk to the girls, but she did not chat with Futian. She seemed completely unsurprised by Futian's arrival and did not ask him anything except for that initial question. The rest of the time, she did not even seem to be aware of Futian's existence. After Futian finished the soup quietly, he returned to the lake alone, watching the calm surface of the lake. He took a deep breath and was ready to leave. It was not possible for him to do anything here, and he couldn't ask any questions, so he could only go. But at this moment, he heard footsteps behind him. Futian turned around and saw the woman had walked beside him, and the girls were playing elsewhere. "You are leaving?" the woman asked. Futian nodded. "So, you are not going to do what you came here to do?" The woman looked at the lake and asked him calmly. Obviously, she knew the purpose of Futian's visit. But now, Futian was about to leave without getting what he wanted, which surprised her. "I'm embarrassed to say so," Futian said. "This place outside the world shouldn't be disturbed by people from the world, so I am taking my leave." The woman didn't say anything more. Her eyes were still fixed on the lake. She said softly, "Go. You won't be in danger on this trip." After speaking, the woman turned around and walked back to the huts. Futian turned his head to look at the woman's departing figure, and there was a look of shock in his eyes. She knew the purpose of his coming here, and she knew where he was going. Only people in the imperial palace knew that he had traveled to the dark world, and he did not tell anyone else before he left. If he thought about it, probably only the dark sage had some ideas of his visit. So, how could this woman know any of these? Could it be that she also possessed the ability to predict the future? Or rather, she was originally from the Dark Court and had some connection to the Dark Lord. This woman probably had never left this holy lake before. After all, she had those girls to take care of, so it was unlikely that she had gone to the Dark Court to cultivate. Futian took a deep breath and thought that there were an infinite number of amazing people and things that existed in the world. This woman that he encountered today was such an amazing person. As he put a stop to his curiosity, Futian flickered and disappeared from the shore of the lake. It didn't take long before Futian appeared in the sky above this island of miracles. The terrifying air currents were still circulating between the surrounding heaven and earth. It was as if it was a separate world from that sacred and peaceful island. Futian lowered his head and gave the island one last look. When he turned around, his figure flashed and rushed into the endless darkness. For some reason, he believed what the woman told him. Her calming voice contained a power that was extremely convincing. On this trip to the Dark Court, nothing would happen to him. Chapter 2754 Received. Azura City, the absolute center of the Dark World. Azura City was surrounded by Infernal Mountain, Hell Realm, and Yellow Spring Sea. The entire firmament was dark and gloomy, as terrifying destructive air currents flowed about, like a real city of destruction. Inside Azura City, there were countless top cultivators of the Dark World and numerous horrific forces. The surrounding area was full of tyrannical dark forces. This city was the absolute holy land of the Dark World. This place was governed by terrifying laws of darkness. In Azura City, life and death catastrophe was set upon them as soon as they were born. The will of darkness inside Azura City was everywhere. This aura had integrated into the air they breathed, as it was the spiritual energy between heaven and earth to those who cultivated in the Dark World. But, for a newborn, it was a test of life and death. If the baby could not withstand the darkness and adapt to it, it would die prematurely. Only by passing the test of the darkness could its survival be assured. From a human perspective, this kind of test for a newborn was incredibly cruel. However, this was the belief held by countless cultivators inside Azura City. They firmly believed that if they could not adapt to the darkness, they would not escape their fate or live until adulthood. They were qualified to have a place here and continued living in the Dark World. Of course, a few people chose to leave Azura City before their babies were born. However, this kind of action was frowned upon by the people of Azura City, and these deserters were not qualified to be called citizens of darkness. So, there was no place for them in Azura City. Conversely, any babies that could adapt to this dark power at birth and coexist with the darkness would at the very least become a Run Huang when they grew up. This was also why there were so many terrifying cultivators in Azura City. They were born into the darkness. The Dark World was the cruelest world of all 7 realms. Even the Devil World was nowhere near this extent. The Devil World existed under the Devil Abyss with an equally harsh environment for cultivation. However, it had not subjected newborn babies to a test of life and death right at birth. All they did was continue to drill their descendants in cultivation later on. At this time, Futian came to the center of this cold-blooded dark world, Azura City. Standing under the dim and obscure sky, Futian could feel the destructive power hanging above his head. It seemed that Azura City was surrounded by a destructive aura. Cultivators from the other worlds would find this place highly unsuitable. Here and the Island of Miracles were like 2 separate worlds. It wasn't easy to imagine that they existed under the same sky. The fact that the Dark Court did not destroy that Island of Miracles was probably on account of that exceptional woman. Futian looked up into the distance. A towering building could be vaguely seen at the end of the darkness. The black temple stabbed into the sky, which could be seen even from a great distance away. No matter where in Azura City, one could look up and behold the place of worship in the Dark World. The Dark Court, Futian thought. He had no idea what he would encounter this time on his trip to the Dark Court, or how Qingyao was doing right now. Without thinking further, Futian moved in that direction. When he took one more step, his figure disappeared from the spot. When he reappeared again, he was already in another place inside Azura City. Now that he had reached his destination, there was no longer a need to delay. He moved forward at full speed with Buddha's celerity, rushing full steam to the Dark Court. From a distance, the Dark Court seemed to be just a temple that towered into the sky, but that was because the distance was too far away. Once in the vicinity of the Dark Court, one realized just what kind of behemoth the Dark Court really was. Precisely because of this, the entire Azura field had the vantage point of seeing the Dark Court. Futian was standing at the outer periphery of the Dark Court at this time. When he looked at the area ahead, he practically saw another country. The Dark Court had many layers, and each layer was boundless and vast, populated with countless buildings. It was like an interface, and there was no end in sight. When he raised his head to look up, he found that the Dark Court was like layers of worlds. Futian was suspended in the air and felt inexplicable coercion shroud his body. Above the firmament, the currents of destruction fell upon him, and there were many cultivators who were looking in his direction. Cultivators from the Dark Court stepped out and moved straight in Futian's direction. Futian was soon stopped. Above him, a group of cultivators in jet-black armor appeared. This group of cultivators was all in the realm of Renhuang, acting as guards. Destructive currents flowed upon them. Dangerous aura. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website Wuxia World. Few thanks. Who are you? The guard in the lead came forward with the cultivation of peak Renhuang. The black spear in his hand pointed at Futian, and a dark light shot out from his eyes. Futian came to pay a visit to the court, Futian said in a voice that was loud and clear. The guard's eyes sharpened. It was obvious that he had heard of his name before. At this moment, above the sky, a brilliant divine light sprinkled down from the realm above, and then several figures descended from the sky as if coming for the lower worlds, appearing in front of Futian. Immediately, the guards bowed in deference. The person who arrived was a young man. His temperament was more feminine than masculine. He had a fair face, exuding a sense of great danger. When he fixed his eyes on Futian felt incredibly uncomfortable. "Wah, come with me," the young man said as if he was already waiting for him, knowing that he would return to the Dark Court. Futian didn't think too much, but followed the other party higher into the sky and entered the interior of the Dark Court. They passed through the layers of interfaces and continued going upward until they came to the 99th layer. There were not many cultivators here, but everyone's aura was beyond terrifying. Finally, Futian was brought before that temple, and it was the temple that was seen high in the sky from a distance. There was an open space in front of the temple, and Futian was standing there at the moment, quietly watching and waiting. This trip had gone much smoother than expected, without encountering any trouble. He had not even had to fight before he made his way here. At this moment, an extreme pressure descended from the sky, which made even Futian feel a sense of suffocation. He raised his head to look ahead, knowing that this was the will of the Dark Lord. The sky became dim and lightless, and the sky above Futian turned into a gigantic black screen. There seemed to be a black shadow that appeared above the temple. This black shadow seemed to have been embedded inside the temple, majestic and domineering. Just a vague shadow itself was enough to contain such supreme coercion. Futian. A majestic voice came from the dark shadow in the temple, echoing between heaven and earth. Just a voice alone made Futian feel like he was compelled to bow his head to worship the shadow. Futian greets the Dark Lord. Futian bowed to pay his respects. He had not expected the Dark Lord to receive him so readily. Chapter 2755 The Will of Darkness. The gigantic figure above the temple lorded above Futian and continued, Futian, your cultivation is extraordinary, and on top of that, you have an unusual relationship with the heir I have chosen. Qingyao is willing to betray the Dark Court for your sake. What do you think should be done? Dark Lord, Qingyao has been good to me. I am sure you must know that Qingyao knew me before she joined the Dark Court. She only did what she did because she still remembered our friendship. However, other than that, Qingyao has never had the slightest intention of disobeying the Dark Lord, Yi Futian replied. People who cultivated in the Dark Court should have no emotions, except to do the will of the darkness. Her action was already an act of betrayal to the darkness. The Dark Lord roared as he released the pressure, giving Yi Futian a feeling of extreme oppression as he was placed under a terrifying coercion. He knew that the Dark Lord oppressed his will to make him emotionally unstable. Furthermore, you have slaughtered many cultivators of the Dark World. If one day you chose to be at war with the Dark World, wouldn't the heir I have raised by my own hands rebel against her own people? The Dark Lord continued to press. For a time, Yi Futian was speechless. In some sense, Yi Qingyao's action had indeed violated a major taboo of the Dark World. Yi Futian and the Dark World had never had a harmonious relationship since a long time ago, and battles had broken out between them several times. I can't predict the future, but I can promise you that I won't put Qingyao in a situation where she is forced to choose between the Dark Court and myself, Yi Futian replied. The things of the world are unpredictable. If you do fight with the Dark Court in the future, the situation will be beyond your control, let alone the empty promises you are making now, the Dark Lord said with an icy voice. What's more, I have never believed in promises. Then, what does the Dark Lord require of me? Yi Futian asked directly. Since the Dark Lord had received him in person, he must have some ideas of his own, or else he would not have bothered talking this long with him. All the Dark Lord had to do was make one move, and all would be finished. High above the temple, the eyes of the Dark Lord stared at Yi Futian. A voice was heard saying, if you agree to join the Dark Court, I can bestow you with the position of the Great Shaman one day. Then, you may fight side by side with Qingyao, sweeping across the divine prefecture together and avenging Emperor Yi Qing at the same time. Yi Futian was a little surprised. The Dark Lord wanted to give him the position of the Great Shaman of the Dark Court. The Great Shaman of the Dark Court was the head of the three lords, and the first person under the command of the Dark Lord was now served by Lord Shaman. The Dark Lord had promised Yi Futian this position in the future. However, with Yi Futian's strength today, he would catch up with the Lord Shaman in the future. As long as he was willing to join the Dark Court, then the power held in his hands would also be the power of the Dark Court. This made Yi Futian far more valuable than the Lord Shaman. B and SC now. /B. If this was his way of thinking, then everything the Dark Lord said made great sense now. However, when he said this, he had not considered Lord Shaman's feelings. The Dark Lord was known as a tyrant of the Dark World. Maybe he didn't really care how the others saw him, and he didn't need anyone to be grateful to him. Even hating him was nothing to him. His will was to let darkness descend onto the world. I thank the Dark Lord for the offer. It's just that I'm now in charge of Zway Segmentum, and many friends followed me. If I join the Dark Court, it will undoubtedly be seen as a betrayal to everyone else who followed me. I hope the Dark Lord understands my position, Yi Futian politely refused. He could not join the Dark Court. Qingyao is willing to betray the Dark Court for you, but you can't join the Dark Court for her? The Dark Lords asked him coldly. The Dark Lord was being unreasonable. The two had no connection at all. For Yi Qingyao, he had come to the Dark Court all the same, and in here, his life was out of his control. However, he couldn't refute the Dark Lord outright, so he merely said, if the Dark Lord doesn't trust me, you can let me talk to Qingyao. If one day, the Dark Court and I stand on opposing sides, on the battlefield, Qingyao and I could put our personal relationship aside. Wouldn't it be easier if I just killed either one of you? The Dark Lord asked rhetorically. If the Dark Lord can find the next suitable heir, then it would be understandable to do so, Yi Futian replied. The pitch-black eyes of the Dark Lord stared at him as he said, very well. Think clearly, then tell me your answer. I will give you a chance. When his voice faded, a terrifying dark storm submerged Yi Futian's body in an instant. He felt as if he had been caught up in a shower of darkness. In the next moment, he was swept into a separate space by the dark storm. All around him, there was only endless darkness. Yi Futian's expression was not the best. His eyes were terrifying as he tried his best to see through the darkness. At the same time, he released his divine consciousness but found it useless. He moved with Buddha's celerity but soon discovered that he was still in the darkness, unable to get out at all. The Dark Lord had trapped him. On top of the dark court, in the space surrounded by darkness, there was a dark figure sitting on the throne, high above everything and everyone else. Below, a figure was kneeling on the ground. A cape covered her, but it did not cover her face. It was Yi Qingyao. She had seen everything that happened and knew that Yi Futian had come to the dark court. "If I kill him, what will you do?" the Dark Lord asked Yi Qingyao. "Then I will ask my lord to kill me as well," Yi Qingyao replied. "Or else," the Dark Lord said coldly, "I will bring darkness to darkness." Yi Qingyao still knelt on the ground without raising her head, but her icy voice sounded extremely determined. The Dark Lord said, "No father, no king, no love, and no morality is the true meaning of darkness. But you still have your weaknesses. If I kill him, you will have fallen completely into darkness, which, perhaps, will be better for you." "No, I will only bring darkness to darkness and make darkness disappear from the world," Yi Qingyao responded. "Very well." The Dark Lord looked intently at Yi Qingyao and said, "Yi Qingyao, I order you to return to God's continent right now, cooperate with the great shaman, and bring the darkness to the continent of the ruins that belong to the gods. I want darkness to cover every inch of the continent." Today, the cultivators of all the worlds had gathered upon the continent of the ruins that belonged to the gods. This place was undoubtedly a perfect battlefield, suitable for starting a war, and preferably a battle of the world. "Yes, my lord." Yi Qingyao took the order and left without asking any more questions. After Yi Qingyao left, the Dark Lord stared at her departing figure for a long time. Everyone in the Dark Court knew that he was partial to Yi Qingyao, yet no one knew why. Yi Qingyao's life had been incredibly miserable and full of suffering. Her heart was cold, and her blood was equally cold. She was destined to belong to the darkness and bring misfortunes to the world. He raised his head to look in another direction. Yi Futian was trapped inside that darkness. He was thinking, how could he make Yi Futian be part of this darkness as well? It would be a pity if such a talented person did not become part of the darkness. Chapter 2756, The Start of the Storm. Yi Futian was trapped in the dark world. It was like a prison. No matter what he did, he couldn't walk out of this dark prison. The dark prison wouldn't affect his descriptions, nor would it affect his divine consciousness. The force of the great path and celerity could all be used as normal, but he just couldn't get out. It was as if he'd gotten sealed off by true divine power. This was a prison that Tianqian had made just for him, and the Dark Sovereign had done it personally. No matter how strong Yi Futian was, it was most likely impossible if he wanted to get out. The Dark Sovereign was a true great emperor, the ruler of the dark world. They had only imprisoned him and didn't intend to kill him. After many attempts, Yi Futian also understood that he couldn't escape, so he gave up and just sat down to cultivate. A huge face appeared in the boundless darkness. It seemed to have been formed from the darkness. A terrifying dark storm swept over. Yi Futian opened his eyes and stared up. He felt an impossibly horrifying dark will. He'd never truly felt such a strong will before. He had met the Devil Emperor before, he had met Donghuang the Great before, and he had received inheritances from many great emperors. But this time, the Dark Sovereign's true will was pressing down at him. This kind of situation had never happened before. "Sovereign, what are you doing?" Yi Futian opened his mouth to ask. "To show you the true world," a wispy voice streamed out. The terrifying storm swept directly at Yi Futian and drowned his body. Then the tumultuous will rushed straight into Yi Futian's mind. The next moment, his entire body shook violently. Boom! This will was not meant to destroy his willpower. Instead, it brought him to another world. He seemed to have entered a special state. Countless images and memories flooded instantly into the depths of his mind. It was as if these had always belonged to him. After a few moments, the dark will dissipated. Yi Futian's aura rippled violently over his body, and his eyes flew open. A beam of cold light shot out of his eyes. Phew! Futian let out a turbid sigh. It had only been a moment, but it was as if he had experienced countless lives, a century in 1 second. It was countless stories, and he was the main character of each story, experiencing it personally. And without exception, each story had been tragic. The evil of humanity was shown fully. You implanted the memories directly. Futian felt his will somewhat being used without his control. He looked up at the dark face in the void. The implanted memories created strong empathy within him. He had experienced it personally, rather than looking on as a bystander, so the impact was huge. He could feel his heart had turned cold after experiencing cycle after cycle, and his mind was filled with negative thoughts. What you saw is the true world. You probably have experienced much in your own life. Think back on it well. The voice came again, trying to influence him. To make someone fall into darkness, you had to first change their mindset and make darkness take over their entirety. Then they would naturally bring darkness to the world. The true world does not only have one side to it. Futian believed that the memories in his mind had all truly happened, but if he was corroded by this will, then he would become cruel, bloodthirsty, and not trust anyone. The light of Buddha shone and enveloped over Futian's body. He closed his eyes as his body shone with golden light. The Buddhist voice circled around. Futian's lips moved, and when he uttered the Buddhist voice, it transformed into symbols that filled the darkness. Humph! There was a cold huff, and it shattered the light of Buddha on Futian's body. Dark power shrouded his body. Destruction, death, and other forces ate away at him, and another horrifying intent rushed into Futian's mind. Once again, Futian experienced everything from the past, feeling all the evils of the human world. But when he woke, he reminded himself again. The light of Buddha wrapped around him, and he chanted the ancient scriptures so his willpower would not be destroyed. After coming to this stalemate many times, the dark will disappeared. It had given up. Futian had extremely strong will naturally, and was able to maintain his reason even when suffering intense attacks and influences. He controlled himself to drive away the darkness with the power of the Buddha. Of course, this was not all in vain. Everything that had been implanted into Futian's mind truly existed. The Buddha's power could drive away the negative thoughts that were born, but these memories would still continue to affect him. None of this could be erased. Time passed day by day. Imprisoned by the darkness, Futian received news from the ruins of the gods' continent. There had been conflicts between the various worlds and the ruins of the gods' continent before, but they had not exploded completely. Now, these conflicts had finally exploded fully. And this was all because of the Dark Court. He heard that recently, cultivators of the Dark World kept looting and killing, causing wars to erupt all over. Traces of the Dark Court were behind many of these events, so more and more wars erupted and powers of the Dark World and Divine Prefecture entered a full-out war first. War ravaged everywhere. At the same time, the Dark Court acted upon the forces of the Donghuang Imperial Palace. They even wanted to conquer the Naga ruins. The war between these two parties was like a preamble, causing war to sweep across the entire ruins continent. Other forces were gradually swept into the storm, starting from the random battles to wars that began gradually between the powers of various worlds. Conflict continued to erupt between the Devil World, Divine Prefecture, World of Buddhism, and Human Realm. It was the same for the Empty Divine Realm. This was not even led by the Devil Imperial Palace and Empty Mountain. Before they even decided to get involved in the storm, forces of the Devil World, Empty Divine Realm, and other worlds had already started fighting and intensifying. It was not under their control anymore. An intense storm was brewing in the ruins of the gods' continent. Futian also learned that Qingyao had returned to ruins of the gods' continent and was in the war. She would lead the strong fighters of the Dark Court to attack the Divine Prefecture, which was headed by Donghuang Imperial Palace. Sovereign! Futian raised his head and yelled into the void. This was the Dark Court, and the Dark Sovereign was omnipresent. He knew that the Dark Sovereign may have never come here, but it could also be said that he was always here. You have imprisoned me for many days. Since you have already come to a decision, how much longer will you keep me here for? Futian said loudly. I have given them orders before coming to the Dark Court. If I run into danger in the Dark Court, The Ziwei Imperial Palace and Devil World will attack the Dark Court. Are you threatening me? A cold voice said, bringing along a suffocating weight. It is not a threat. It is the truth, Futian said. If I do not return, and even if the Ziwei Imperial Palace does not say anything, Yusheng will still lead the Devil Imperial Palace to attack the Dark Court. At that time, I will have them persuade Qingyao to rebel. The rules of 6 worlds will be in that battle. It would be difficult for even you, the sovereign, to interfere, right? Chapter 2757 War. As Futian finished speaking, an even stronger pressure weighed down. A divine phantom appeared in the air above his head. The horrifying will pressed down on his body, giving him the feeling that the sky was weighing on him. Futian was extremely uncomfortable. His body was drenched with sweat. Pushing back against the pressurizing force with his strong intent, he continued to stare up at the sky and said, "It is the same even if you kill me. Before coming here, I didn't think that the sovereign would harm a junior, but I still planned for the worst. If something really happened to me, Ziwei Imperial Palace and Yusheng will view the Dark Court as their nemesis." At present, the 6 worlds were at a relatively equal state, but if the Ziwei Imperial Palace and Devil Imperial Palace fought against the Dark Court at the same time, then the tides would be turned instantly. It would be impossible for the Dark Sovereign to make darkness fall over the world. At that time, Qingyao would rebel against the Dark Court too, so Futian's threat was useful in a certain way. Do you think the Divine Prefecture will forgive the Ziwei Imperial Palace? Even without the Donghuang Imperial Palace, the ancient god clans of the Divine Prefecture will not let them survive, the Dark Sovereign said coldly. He clearly was quite familiar with these things. The Divine Prefecture and Ziwei Imperial Palace's rivalry is because of me, Futian continued. If something happens to me, this rivalry will not exist anymore either. The Ziwei Imperial Palace will choose to join the Devil Imperial Palace or even Donghuang Imperial Palace. They will have a mutual enemy. On the other hand, none of this will happen if I return safely. The Dark Sovereign also understood this. Not only would it not happen, with the rivalry between him and the Divine Prefecture, but it might be pointed at the Divine Prefecture instead. Back then, neither the Dark World nor the empty Divine Realm had touched Futian. They had even chosen to help him, thus creating an enemy for the Divine Prefecture. An enemy's enemy would be a friend. That was why they had let Futian grow powerful freely. Otherwise, all the conflicts from before would be more than enough for them to attack Futian. What you said is true. In that case, I will give you 1 month. After 1 month, I will let you go. If you let people attack the Dark Court in this month, then I shall kill you. The dark storm rolled violently, and the horrifying will descended upon Futian's body before retreating. The voice was left echoing through the air. Clearly, the Dark Sovereign had been angered by his threat. Futian actually had the guts to threaten the ruler of the Dark World. He was the king of the Dark World. No one could threaten him. He wanted to see if Futian dared to try. The repressive aura disappeared, and the dark storm scattered too. Futian watched this all. The Dark Sovereign had not given him the chance to negotiate at all, and instead told him directly how he would take care of this, letting him choose. Gamble his life? Futian clearly did not dare to do so. The Dark Sovereign had his own reserves, but he would not dare to gamble with his life either. Now, all he could do was continue to wait for a month. The Dark Sovereign had already taken a step back since he could give him an exact time. Otherwise, it would not be enough for Futian to die 100 times to threaten a sovereign like this. Even though his cultivation was already very powerful, he was still nothing different from an ant before a great emperor. He could be squashed to death easily. Futian closed his eyes and continued to cultivate quietly. 1 month's time was not long for him, but in the stormy ruins of the god's mainland, things could change drastically every day. He did not know how this storm would continue to evolve. He told the Ziwei Imperial Palace to stay put for now and not get involved before he returned, lest the unpredictable happened. While Futian was at the Dark Court, news about the ruins of the god's mainland would come every day. The battles continued to expand, involving the entire continent with terrifying speed. Forces and cultivators from every world entered the war, killing and looting wildly. The countless treasures, relics, and cultivation resources created had all been stolen and robbed in the recent few years. This was also why the continent had such massive cultivation resources now, and an important reason why the war expanded so quickly. Cultivators of many large forces even hoped that the emperor-level forces would declare war directly. It would be best if they could destroy the entire world, and both sides would suffer horrible losses. Only then would they have a chance. Otherwise, the best cultivation resources were monopolized by the emperor-level forces. They could only receive very few resources. Even if they had any, they were all leftovers. Some precious cultivation resources were also in the hands of top forces below the emperor-level forces. Under this situation, they wished for the war to be as destructive as possible. Heroes were born from chaos. They could only find the chance to turn the tides and come up top. Otherwise, if peace continued like before, all the cultivation resources would be split up and squeezed dry. It would have nothing to do with them. Personal interest was often the source of all battles and wars. This war was not the same as the previous battles in the Divine Prefecture. It was chaotic and without order. The emperor-level forces did not unify the various forces under them. Instead, it was the various forces that started the battles in the first place, and then it spread to sweep the emperor-level forces in two. With a war at such a grand scale, a large number of strong cultivators would die in the ruins of the gods' continent. Some wondered if this was a curse from the gods. In the battle of heavenly laws that took place before, this had been the main battlefield, and it had been so destructive that the gods had fallen. Now, countless years later, this ancient battlefield appeared to the world again and ignited an unprecedentedly horrible battle again. It was like a replay of what had happened years ago. Seeing the endless deaths of cultivators, people seemed to witness what the era of the end of the gods had been like. The multitude of gods had whittled. The various gods had fallen, and a split appeared in the cultivation world. At this time in the Dark World, Futian received news from the battlefield again. It said that Lord Shaman and Qingyao led the Dark Court to a direct battle against the Donghuang Imperial Palace of the Divine Prefecture. The battle had been horrifying. Qingyao had the divine power that rivaled Donghuang Diyuan, and the two had an intense fight. Qingyao had wanted to kill Donghuang Diyuan. However, the battle had no result. Both parties had retreated, but it was meaningful. This meant that the direct battle between emperor-level forces had begun now. It was no longer a competition for the relics. It was war. Had the Dark Sovereign ordered Qingyao to kill Donghuang Diyuan? Futian thought to himself as he sat there. Even though Donghuang Diyuan was his mortal enemy, he did not seem to carry that much of hatred. Of course, he still worried a bit for Qingyao. Whether she lost or won, it might not be a good thing for her. If she really did kill Donghuang Diyuan, she probably would not be able to live either. But both sides were emperor-level forces and filled with strong fighters. She would not die so easily. Without realizing, the 1 month was finally up. The Dark Sovereign had promised to let him go at this time. Chapter 2758 The Dark Sovereign's Belief. That day, the Dark Sovereign descended once again. The terrible dark storm roared and ravaged, and a dark face appeared in the air above Futian. Futian knew that the actual Dark Sovereign had never appeared this entire time. This was still just the materialization of the Dark Sovereign's will. Futian raised his head and looked at the dark face, waiting for the other to speak. "Do you know how Emperor Qing died back then?" the Dark Sovereign asked Futian. Futian's pupils constricted. He studied the other closely, seeming to care deeply. Ever since Donghuang the Great had appeared back then and the master of the Four Corners village had stopped Donghuang the Great from hurting Futian, people believed that he was a descendant of Emperor Qing. However, he indeed had an extraordinary relationship with Emperor Qing. "Sovereign, please tell me," Futian said. Back then, the twin great emperors presided over the Divine Prefecture. When another one was added, the world's equilibrium was already ruined. The Devil Emperor, Evil Emperor, and I naturally would not let something like this happen. If it were merely this, it still would not be enough to make the twin great emperors turn on each other. Thus, it was not only the wills of the three emperors. The human ancestor and the Buddha would not want this to happen either. It was the mutual will of the world that caused the tragedy to occur. In order to protect himself, Dong Huang the Great suddenly killed his brother that had gone through thick and thin with him. Dong Huang the Great abandoned his wife and killed his brother to prove his way. He built his status in the divine prefecture, becoming one of the top figures known by all in the world. Yet, all his actions from before would not be forgotten either. The Dark Sovereign said coldly, "The evilness and ingenuity of humanity were expressed perfectly by Dong Huang the Great and the other two. The Devil Emperor, Evil Emperor, and I do whatever we want to do, but look at Dong Huang, the human ancestor, and the others. See how they do the most shameless things under the name of justice. The human ancestor calls himself the orthodox of the human world and has an air of justice, but he had forced many people to their deaths back then. Now, he is still allying with Dong Huang. How fake is he? How despicable is he?" There was strong disgust in the Dark Sovereign's voice. With such a horrid matter and ruled by such a pathetic group of people, what use is there for them? Futian was extremely shaken up inside after hearing this. Was this the truth of what had happened back then? He trained his eyes firmly on the Dark Sovereign's face. Even if this was not the truth, it was probably very close to the truth. Were the beings that ruled the world really, as the Dark Sovereign said? He could feel the hatred that the Dark Sovereign had towards the world. Everything he saw was dark. Perhaps it was because he had seen too much that he wanted the darkness to fall upon the world as a whole. He even wanted everyone to fall into darkness. He wanted to change Futian's will and make him enter the darkness too. "So, you hate this turbid world," Futian said to the Dark Shadow. "B, you are wrong." The Dark Sovereign's face stared at him. All goes in reverse if it becomes too extreme. Nowadays, the world is filled with faux kindness, and thus, it needs darkness. When darkness envelopes the world, that is when true light will appear, and this world will be reshaped. Futian looked at the dark face. This was the ruler of the dark world. He had such a radical idea and wanted to shroud the entire world in darkness, but it was actually to reshape the world. So, was he good or bad? In other words, you want to bring darkness to the world because your heart is filled with light. Futian's voice carried some hints of irony. This was a practically mad and extreme obsession. The Dark Sovereign's huge face stared at Futian and said solemnly, "I am the king of darkness. I should create unparalleled achievements, be worshipped by the world, and make the heavens submit under me." Futian looked at that solemn face and felt speechless. It was a radical idea, but the Dark Sovereign was indeed qualified to play this game as the king of darkness. Bringing darkness to the world was not impossible for him. Was this madness what had given him success, letting him become the ruler of the dark world? Your body exists in the darkness, but there is pity in your heart. When you see the true nature of the world clearly one day, you might understand me then, the Dark Sovereign continued to say. "Go back now. Feel this turbid world closely. You will turn around. With that, the horrifying dark will transform into a shocking windstorm that swept towards Futian's body. He felt himself entering a black hole. Everything before his eyes was changing. When the windstorm scattered, he realized that he had come out already. He was somewhere far from the Dark Court. He glanced in the direction of the Dark Court and took a deep breath to calm his heart. This trip had quite an impact on him. The Dark Sovereign's words had touched him as well. Did all those great emperors have such extreme obsessions? The Devil Emperor wanted the demons to ascend upon the world. He was not satisfied with being trapped within the devil abyss of the devil world. That was the humiliation of the devil world. It was a prison. Why should the devil world go through all of this? The Dark Sovereign wanted to bring darkness to the world, but in his eyes, he was transforming the world and letting it be reborn. The King of Darkness wanted to accomplish great things, be worshipped by the world, and make the heavens submit under him. Then what about the human ancestor, the Buddha, the evil emperor, and Dong Huang the Great? What were their beliefs? The Dark Sovereign said that Dong Huang the Great had abandoned his wife and killed his brother. And yet, many cultivators of the divine prefecture worshipped him greatly. Other than the breakup of the twin great emperors, Dong Huang the Great had wanted to make the martial arts flourish so the people could cultivate better. What kind of person was Dong Huang the Great exactly? Perhaps Dong Huang Diyuan's sadness was related to this. In addition, There actually was an island of light within the most terrifying region of the dark world. Did the Dark Sovereign allow this miraculous island to exist to prove that when the world was filled with darkness, there would be true light? Who exactly was the woman in the sacred lake? Futian turned around and began walking away from this place. Nothing that the Dark Sovereign had done before had affected him as strongly as the last conversation with Futian. He could not help but think of some things. He wanted to explore the truest world. What kinds of people were the Buddha, human ancestor, and Donghuang the Great really? Great emperors were already gods. After becoming gods, what kinds of beliefs did they hold on to? Like the Dark Sovereign said, could they really be a group of ingenuine people? B-UN/B. Or maybe it was because everything the Dark Sovereign saw was dark, so he naturally held some bias. If this world really were, as the Dark Sovereign said, then would he himself change? Futian thought that he probably would. The memories that the Dark Sovereign had forcefully planted into his mind had made him experience a lot of darkness, but they could not change him. Futian thought that this might be related to his real experiences. It was not that he had not experienced darkness before, but at many of his most important moments, there would always be some dazzling people who helped him feel the light and warmth of the world. His teacher, Hua Fenglu, Grandmaster, third brother Gu Donglu, second sister Zhuge Mingyue, big brother and teacher Mr. Du, Dozhan, Emperor Xia, Dali Imperial Advisor Qi Xiangang, brother Yin Yuan, and many others. These people had all played important roles in his growth. Lord Taishin and the other seniors he had met later all had their own unique personalities, and these all influenced him. Thus, one could say he was lucky. This entire path was dangerous, but he had met these people, allowing him to never waver from his true nature. Pushing these thoughts away, Futian did not overthink. Right now, he was still only a chess piece on the game board. He could not even see clearly who was playing the game. He would only be qualified to fight with the emperors when he reached the imperial realm. Chapter 2759A Rumor. The Ruins Continent. After Futian returned to this land through the tunnel from the dark world, he could see that there was war everywhere below him. It was like a completely different world from when he had left. But this was normal. After the war for the relics, they had entered an era of peace. Everyone began cultivating themselves, and countless people had improved, entering new realms. But even more had received nothing. Under this background, war had actually always been brewing. Now, the Dark Sovereign's order caused the cultivators of the Dark World to ignite this battlefield, causing the pent-up emotions to burst out from countless cultivators' hearts. Futian sped up and hurried down the road. He already knew when the wars had erupted and ordered the cultivators of the Imperial Palace not to get involved in the fighting so impulsively. He himself had been trapped in the Dark Court. If they joined the war and an accident happened, it would be very troublesome. Plus, the Imperial Court had no great emperor. They did not have as much confidence. The Dark Sovereign's words actually did have some truth to it. Similarly, what the Lord Shaman had said before did not sound nice, but it was indeed true. The fact that he could live until now was partially true because the Master had interfered with Donghuang the Great. In addition, the Dark Court and Empty Mountain had allowed him to grow more powerful, letting him become the enemy of the Divine Prefecture. Plus, the human realm did not have any conflicts with him at the moment. The Buddha of the Western Heaven Buddhists was quite friendly towards him. He could not find out right now if they were ingenuine as the Dark Sovereign had said, but at least for now, he did not feel it. Under these circumstances, he was actually surviving between the cracks, but he did not know if this situation was because of the person controlling the chess pieces. Futian returned to the Imperial Palace and went straight to the tallest palace. The strong figures of the Imperial Palace had all gone up the steps and gathered towards there after they learned that Futian was back. Soon, most of the core figures of the Imperial Palace had arrived, gathering outside the palace. Hua Jieyu also came out of the palace and came to Futian's side. Meanwhile, Ling Long stood quietly behind him. Shi Qiao walked towards Futian and stopped not too far from him. Smiling, she said, "You're quite brave, even daring to go to the Dark Court." They had all heard of the Dark Court before. The ruler of the Dark Court was a tyrant who controlled the darkness. Who knew what he would do? Yi Futian's actions had been too risky. I'm back safely, am I not? Yi Futian joked, not caring too much. He had run into some troubles during this trip, but it was actually quite successful. It was an experience and quite meaningful for him. Whether it was the woman in the sacred lake that he'd met in the Island of Miracles, or what the Dark Sovereign had said to him, they all affected him to some point. Weren't you worried what would happen to the Yi Imperial Palace if that tyrant grew angry and decided to make you stay there forever? Shi Qiao seemed quite unhappy with this. She thought that Yi Futian's trip had been too stubborn and impulsive. Even though she understood that Yi Futian cared deeply for friends, Yi Qingyao was still someone cultivated in the Dark Court. He was unable to change Yi Qingyao's fate. In the end, it would be decided by the Dark Sovereign. Even if he could change anything, it was understandable in terms of emotions to make the Yi Imperial Palace fall into a crisis for Yi Qingyao. Still, rationally, it should not have been done. Of course, she was not actually angry. If Yi Futian had not gone, he wouldn't be himself. Perhaps this was also why he would have so many excellent people gathered around him, willingly following him. Many of these people had been following him as his seniors since Yi Futian was still weak. I'll be more careful in the future. Hearing Shi Qiao's demand, Yi Futian shook his head with a wry smile. On the side, Hua Jieyu watched this scene with a smile. Ahem. The old palace leader of the West Imperial Palace coughed, and Shi Qiao's expression instantly turned a bit strange. She said, as your ally and ruler of the West Imperial Palace of the Yi Imperial Palace, I must remind Palace Lord Yi to think more of the big picture in the future. The surrounding people all looked at her. Many secretly smiled and glanced at Shi Qiao and Yi Futian. Was she feeling guilty now? They could not help but be impressed by the Palace Lord. He was truly powerful. They heard that. So impressive. Okay. Yi Futian nodded. He looked at everyone and abruptly became serious. How is the outside world now? He asked. This question changed the topic, avoiding the awkward situation from earlier. The group did not focus on the small matter anymore either. After all, the madam of the palace was still there. It wasn't their place to worry about this. Even if the palace lord wanted a mistress, it would be the madam's problem. Shi Qiao was also an extraordinary woman and the descendant of a great emperor, but they did not think anything was wrong with taking a mistress. After all, that was Yi Futian, their palace lord. What was wrong with a mistress or concubine? After the palace lord became an emperor, then she would be the empress and be seen by the world. The fire of war burns everywhere, and forces from all 6 worlds are involved, the Supreme Sword Lord said. It's no longer a unified war. The forces of the 6 worlds are fighting independently, and there are endless conflicts between imperial palaces. The most intense of it all would be the Dark Court and Donghuang Imperial Palace. A huge battle between them not too long ago and will continue in the future. This battle might ignite all the accumulated conflicts of the 6 worlds and result in a chaotic war that surpasses what happened more than 400 years ago. This storm is growing stronger and stronger. It looks to be going out of control. Plus, no force of the 6 worlds even wanted to control the situation. Or perhaps a juncture had appeared in the ruins continent, the juncture of war. This place had many opportunities and inheritances left by many great emperors. This independent continent was suitable for a battleground. This change would affect the setup of the 6 worlds and may even create some extraordinary people. No one knew if someone like a great emperor would arrive. Yes. Yi Futian nodded. Any news from the Heaven Realm? No. The Supreme Sword Lord shook his head. I have not heard of the Heaven Realm joining the war. They disappeared after leaving the old Heaven Court and are staying low as before. But Yi Futian frowned. The Heaven Realm was probably hoping to reap the benefits without doing anything. That Ji Wudao was extremely dangerous. He had felt this in the restricted area. This person had swallowed up many relic inheritances, and his potential was honestly terrifying. There's another news from the outside world, the Supreme Sword Lord continued. What news? Yi Futian asked. It's still a small rumor now, and can't be confirmed, the Supreme Sword Lord said. It's spread from the strong cultivators of the human realm. Apparently, the human ancestor of the human realm wishes for a marriage alliance with the divine prefecture. He might represent his disciple, Di Hao, to propose it to Donghuang the Great. Yi Futian's pupils constricted. He was not sure what exactly had happened back then, but if this rumor was true, then the intent behind it could not be so simple, especially after connecting it to what the Dark Sovereign had said. The human ancestor may have taken part in that matter too. Then what was the ulterior motive of this marriage proposal? Chapter 2760 War. The timing of the human realm's marriage proposal was also very sensitive. There were conflicts in the 6 realms now, and war could start at any second, possibly causing a super war. It was clearly not so simple for the human realm to propose marriage at this time. But would Donghuang the Great agree? Donghuang Diyuan was the only princess of the Divine Prefecture and the only child of Donghuang the Great. She would inherit the Divine Prefecture in the future. If Dihao and Donghuang Diyuan married, who would go with whom? Or would the two remain separated, one in the human realm and one in the Divine Prefecture? Dihao is also the heir of the human realm. However, the human ancestor had reigned for too long, and it was questionable if Dihao could inherit the position. Even if he became a great emperor, would the human ancestor give him the emperor position and let Dihao rule the human realm? The scepter might be passed on, but maybe Dihao would help the human ancestor manage the human realm while the human ancestor was still the supreme. However, forces no longer could only have one great emperor. Instead, it was like prehistoric times where some supernatural figures existed and had great emperors under them. But no matter how you viewed it, Donghuang Diyuan was special. She couldn't become cultivation partners like the ordinary person and cultivate with them. She was not weaker than a man either. Yi Futian did not know if Donghuang the Great would agree with this marriage. Of course, it seemed not to have much to do with him at this point. It was just that if the human realm and divine prefecture went into a marriage alliance, their relationship would be more unusual, and it would affect the future setup of the cultivation world. The human realm wants to marry Donghuang Diyuan, Yi Futian said in a low voice. Not simple. Indeed, the Supreme Swordlord said. After the news spread, many people in the divine prefecture started feeling unhappy. They were upset about the actions of the human realm. Donghuang the Great is the supreme ruler of the divine prefecture, and Donghuang Diyuan, as the heir, belongs to the divine prefecture. Their cultivators believe that the human ancestor's action is disrespecting Donghuang the Great. People of the divine prefecture naturally don't want to see their princess marry an outsider, Yi Futian said. At this time, more cultivators arrived here from the outside. Palace Lord. Fang Huan walked over and bowed slightly in Yi Futian's direction from the bottom of the steps. In addition to cultivating, Fang Huan had been responsible for collecting news about the outer realms during this time. Yi Futian gazed at Fang Huan, only to hear him say, "There are new changes in the outer realms." The Dark Court led the Dark World's army toward the Naga relics in the Divine Prefecture. It seems that a large-scale war will occur. Fighting has already erupted in their path. Hearing Fang Huan's words, a beam of light shot from Yi Futian's eyes. He had just returned, and the Dark Court had already led their army to attack. Could this be the Dark Sovereign's order? He had calculated the time that Yi Futian would return ideally and ordered the Dark Court to strike the Divine Prefecture. Did he want to see if Yi Futian would lead the Ziwei Imperial Palace to give aid? Of course, this was only Yi Futian's guess. But with the Dark Sovereign's personality, it was indeed possible. He wanted to bring darkness to the world and wanted Yi Futian to be involved, falling into darkness. But if one had to describe their relationship, Yi Futian was not very friendly with either the Divine Prefecture or the Dark Court. However, Yi Qingyao was in the Dark Court. Forces of the other worlds should have heard the commotion too, Fang Huan continued to say. I'm sure they will have Embark too. This war that the Dark Court has started is even grander in scale than last time. They led all the forces of the Dark World and everywhere that they passed to darkness. Does the Dark Court want to start a war of utter destruction? Hearing Fang Huan's words, Fang Gai showed a shocked expression. Before the two parties already fought, but both retreated without entangling. Now, it seems that the previous battle had only been a test. This time, they're serious. What exactly is their goal? Their goal is to create chaos in the 6 realms. Best if the Ziwei Imperial Palace gets involved too, Yi Futian said. After becoming more familiar with the Dark Sovereign, he could understand now that everything he did was only for one goal. He wanted order to collapse, for the six realms to be in a chaotic war, and for the world to fall into darkness. Starting this war was imperative. Many years ago, when the outer realms and original realm were isolated, the Dark World's power had already begun infiltrating the hidden land realm of the Nine Realms. The hidden land realm had been turned into the Dark World. Indeed, the Dark Court has always wanted to bring the world to darkness. The Supreme Swordlord nodded on the side. When darkness shrouded the entire world, wouldn't the Dark Sovereign be unbeatable? Are we going? Fongai asked. Futian had just returned from the Dark World, and he claimed that the Dark Court wanted the Ziwei Imperial Palace to get involved in this battle. So, should they go or not? Of course we will go. Futian nodded and said, let's set off. Yes. All the strong figures nodded, accepting the order. Instantly, the mass of strong fighters set off away from the Yi Imperial Palace. Outside of the Yi Imperial Palace was a city that the cultivators of the Ziwei Segmentum had established. They built the city surrounding the Yi Imperial Palace to cultivate, and they were not too affected by this storm, other than the ones who purposely went out to fight for relics. However, most of the cultivators from the Ziwei Segmentum were careful and kept a low profile. Not many of them had gotten involved in the fighting. Other forces would not come to pick fights voluntarily either. After all, Futian had a threatening reputation nowadays. He was someone who even dared to declare war on the Dark Court. Futian's group continued, going towards the Divine Prefecture cultivators controlled. When they arrived where the Divine Prefecture cultivators were, they discovered that war had already spread here. Everywhere the Dark Army passed, the world was dusky and dim, and fighting erupted everywhere. It was the fighting between the strong figures of the Dark World and Divine Prefecture. Futian's group continued forward, passing through the battlefield. This battlefield stretched along the path. A horrible great path weighed down and swept through the world, but the strong figures of the Dark Court did not participate. It seemed that the two parties had some tacit understanding that the Emperor-level forces would not interfere with the fighting. Otherwise, the deaths would be even more horrible. Along the way, there were piles of corpses. No one knew how many strong figures had died on the battleground. Can't see the end. Old Ma gazed into the distance, but he could not see the end of the battlefield. It was as if the entire world was at war. The Dark Court is too crazy, the Supreme. Forward, they saw the battlefield stretch forward. The army continued to attack the core areas of the Divine Prefecture as if wanting to invade the Naga relics, where the Donghuang Imperial Palace was located. Futian was also shocked when seeing this horrible war. He did not know how many strong figures would die in such a large-scale war. Too many high-level figures from the Six Realms had come to the relics battlefield. However, Futian did not participate. He continued forward. As they approached the Naga relics, he saw the domain leaders of the 18 domains personally leading the war. He also saw the ancient god clans killing madly. Chapter 27:61 Hypocritical? Passing the sky over the battlefield, Futian's group continued forward, and they saw a terrifying windstorm appear in the distant sky. War has started already, someone said on the side. There was still a long distance, but in the sky, they could already see the war. The aura was terrible, and the sky looked like the end of the world. It should be Lord Shaman, Futian said. This scene was slightly familiar. It had looked like this when Lord Shaman had declared war on them back then. Yes, it's Li Daoshou and Lord Shaman battling, the Supreme Swordlord said from the side. Li Daoshou was the top figure under Donghuang the Great. He had cultivated for many years, having cultivated for even longer than Donghuang the Great. No one knew why he followed Donghuang the Great, but he had been beside Donghuang the Great long ago. He rarely appeared in public and had a very high status. According to rumors, there had been another supernatural figure back then besides Donghuang the Great and Emperor Yi Qing. He had been shoulder to shoulder with Li Daoshou, but after the war back then, he had betrayed the Donghuang Imperial Palace and had been chased to be killed. It was said that he had a very mysterious identity, but not many people knew the truth from back then. However, he seemed to have been a demonic cultivator. I will go first. You all follow me, Futian opened his mouth to say. As soon as he spoke, he sped up and hurried forward, traveling with celerity towards the battlefield. The remaining strong figures all hurried to catch up and sped forward. When Futian arrived on the battlefield, he discovered that other Emperor-level forces had gradually come. They were all in the regions surrounding this area. There was a beam of light in the distant dark windstorm. There, Buddhist cultivators from the Buddhist clan held their hands together and chanted the sound of Buddha, letting the Buddhist light illuminate the land. In another place, the strong figures of the human realm were watching the war beside the fighters of the divine prefecture. It seemed that they would join in at any time. Strong figures of the devil world and empty divine realm were also there. The 6 emperor-level forces of the 6 realms had all arrived. The heaven realm had not come. Ji Wudao would not appear at such an event so easily. He did not even want to have direct conflicts with the various emperor-level forces. If not for the ruins of the old heaven court previously, they would not even let people know how strong the heaven realm was, nor allow people to see what level of cultivation Ji Wudao had reached. Someone like this was usually even more dangerous. He always kept a low profile and hid in the shadows but did many things. He was even cruel, heartless, and cold-blooded, killing many cultivators. Back in the restricted area, he had even wanted to kill Futian. A super-scale war was happening right now in the atrium battlefield. As the Supreme Swordlord said, Lord Shaman, the Great Shaman of the Dark Court, and Li Daoshou, number 1 under Donghuang the Great, fighting. The battle scene of both parties was extremely shocking, destroying the sky and earth. Lord Shaman was borrowing divine power, but Li Daoshou was someone at the top of the golden pyramid of strong cultivators, and they were fighting directly. This was probably the pinnacle fight below the Great Emperor level. At the same time, there were a few large battles nearby too. They were just as horrifying and even attracted more attention, but they were not as destructive as the war between Lord Shaman and Li Daoshou. The Dark Flame Sage was also fighting Feng Ru. The battlefield with the most attention was that of Reaper Yi Qingyao and Donghuang Diyuan. Even though Reaper Yi Qingyao was still clad in a dark cape, everyone already knew that she was a woman and had an unusual relationship with Futian. She even called Futian her older brother. She was reputed to belong to darkness since birth, the child of darkness. Her existence made many cultivators doubt the core of cultivation because she had surpassed countless barriers directly. Rumors said that as the Dark Reaper, she could kill Ronhuang as a child without cultivation abilities. After arriving on the battlefield, Futian's first glance fell upon Yi Qingyao and Donghuang Diyao's battle. Qingyao had already completed her change. She had inherited Shura's spiritual energy and could counter the power of the ancestral dragon and sacred phoenix. Also, Yi Qingyao's aura was very frightening. Her spiritual energy carried the auras of extreme destruction and death. It would be very troublesome if you were hit by it. Someone walked out slowly from Donghuang Diyuan's side, ready to participate. It was the strongest figure of the human realm, Di Hao. He was also the one who had been rumored these past few days to ask for marriage from Donghuang the Great. Divine light wrapped around Di Hao's body. He had a righteous aura and was very handsome. Looking at his status, abilities, and manner, he was a qualified candidate for Donghuang Diyuan. The Dark Sovereign once brought darkness to the world. Now, the cultivators of the Dark Court have found the Azura's relic and inherited Azura's will of destruction. Utilized by darkness, this will of destruction will bring even more disasters to the world. They heard Di Hao say grandly with compassion, as if he really was the bringer of justice for the world. He turned towards the Buddhist cultivators. Bowing slightly, he said, "Dear Buddhas, the darkness is wreaking havoc now, sparking conflicts in the world and causing bloodshed. Along the way here, I saw piles of corpses. Buddhas, I ask you to purge their souls and purify the darkness to allow light to return to the continent." Amitabha. The Buddha of the Buddhist sect put his hands together. Buddhist light shone on his body and illuminated the world, purifying the darkness. The light burned brightly. However, the empty divine realm and devil world cultivators were standing there too. If these realms united, then they clearly would get involved too. Di Hao bowed once again, seeming very humble, and turned around. He looked in the direction of Yi Qingyao. Divine light shimmered on his body, and the righteous aura appeared. The brilliant divine light formed the silhouette of a god, as if the divine human had come to the world. Above the sky, the extremely brilliant divine light shone. Dihao looked up at it. He pointed a finger towards the sky, and a divine sword instantly appeared, flying down from the sky. It was the sword of mankind. Seeing this, the dark saint took a step forward. But when he walked on, the first god of the divine prefecture also took a step forward, and their auras were frightening. The sword of mankind ignored the space and shot down to kill. It contained the power of the divine human and cut an arc in the sky, breaking the space. Boom! The light of darkness windstorm erupted from Yi Qingyao's body. The thousands of arms from Azura's huge divine phantom behind her grabbed towards the atrium at once, actually reaching for the sword of mankind. There was a horrifying sound. The sword of mankind fell down with the purifying divine light. Supported by the spiritual energy, Azura's arms kept getting shattered and destroyed by the divine sword. However, the arms were endless and contained terrible divine power. It actually stopped the sword of mankind's advance and swept it into its arms. At the same time, Yi Qingyao retreated, putting distance between her and Donghuang Diyuan. Donghuang Diyuan did not attack immediately. She glanced in the direction of Dihao. Then a horrible aura roared on her body and summoned a true dragon phoenix. When Yi Futian saw this, he took a step forward and stood before Yi Qingyao. He glanced at Donghuang Diyuan and Dihao. Justice in the world? Were they hypocrites as the Dark Sovereign had said? Chapter 2762 Standpoint. Seeing Yi Futian's appearance, Donghuang Diyuan's expression was emotionless. She uttered coldly, "My father allowed you to live because of past relations, and the imperial palace never killed you. I did not think you would reach this point and fall low enough to ally with the darkness. In this case, you should be killed." Her voice filled the empty void. At the same time, she pointed at Yi Futian below, and countless true dragon phoenixes howled and rushed down instantly. They covered the sun. The huge figures seemed to want to swallow the sky, making Yi Futian below seem extremely small. Back then, Donghuang the Great had indeed let Yi Futian go. Because of the master of the Four Corners village, he did not kill Yi Futian. The Donghuang Imperial Palace had also let him become stronger because of this, showing how generous Donghuang the Great was. However, could it be that Donghuang the Great felt guilty inside? Divine light shimmered on Yi Futian's body. He took a step forward, and his eyes were scary. Frightening divine light shot out of his eyes, transforming into the eye sorcery zone. In an instant, a shocking storm of wool swept through, enveloping the descending true dragon phoenixes. Those true dragon phoenixes instantly started howling wildly, becoming extraordinarily aggressive and cruel. They howled and struggled intensely in the sky. Yi Futian's figure was reflected in their huge eyes. Many strong figures stared at Yi Futian. A highly frightening storm of spiritual will surged from him, transforming into an invisible force covering the sky. The summoned true dragon phoenixes were no longer under Donghuang Diyuan's control. Roar! With a huge boom, some people discovered with a shock that some true dragon phoenixes actually reversed and went growling towards Donghuang Diyuan. The beast control ability. The surrounding strong cultivators from various worlds all narrowed their eyes, staring at Yi Futian. This was the beast control ability that Emperor Yi Qing had been skilled at. The beast army from before had been established by Emperor Yi Qing's accomplishments at the beginning of the divine prefecture's rule. However, in that battle, many grand beasts had died in the hands of Donghuang the Great. It had been cruel, but the victors became kings. Donghuang Diyuan had summoned these demonic beasts, and they were not true demonic beasts, but they still carried the will of demonic beasts from the Naga ruins and were controlled by Yi Futian. Seeing this, Donghuang Diyuan's expression faltered slightly. Then she grabbed in the air with a palm, and the beasts attacking her disappeared directly, turning into nothingness. The other demonic beasts quickly dissipated too. The silhouette of the ancestral dragon and phoenix loomed behind her, staring at Yi Futian with its frightening demonic eyes. It was as if the ancestral dragon and phoenix came back to life. Yi Futian, not long ago, you were still fighting against the dark world. I thought you would stand on the other side of darkness. I did not think you would approach darkness. Dihao stood by Donghuang Diyuan's side and looked down at Yi Futian. The air of righteousness flowed across him, seemingly representing the justice of the world. Your rivalry with the Donghuang Imperial Palace is the rivalry from the previous generation. What kind of figure is Donghuang the Great? He does not wish to hold grudges against a junior like you. If you admit you've gone astray and return, you might still have the chance to accomplish great things, Dihao continued to say, encouraging Futian to admit he's gone astray and return to the correct path. I don't care about your conflicts with the Dark Court, but you are not allowed to touch her. Futian's eyes glanced at Dihao. Admit he has gone astray and return? What counted as going astray? She is the heir of darkness and has now inherited Azura's divine energy, Dihao replied powerfully. She brought darkness to the world and started this battle. She must be killed. Brother, do not get involved, Yi Qingyao transmitted her voice to Futian. The Dark Sovereign had ordered her to start this battle. She knew that the Dark Sovereign's goal was to involve every force in this war, including Futian. But she hoped that Futian could stay out of this and not be swept into the storm. Futian understood this too, of course. But even though he knew this was the Dark Sovereign's conspiracy, he still could not stay out of it. He could only fall into the Dark Sovereign's trap. He raised his head and looked at Dihao. I said, do not touch her, he said. Since he was already involved, then what was there to fear? Ba. With the sound of the Buddha voice, the Buddhist light glimmered brilliantly. The cultivators of the Buddhist clan had been standing in the back the entire time, but they also looked towards Futian now and said, Benefactor Yi, why do this? The speaker was the Vajra Buddha Lord. His cultivation was powerful and had once taught Futian the Buddhist doctrine. Greetings to the great Buddha. Seeing that the Vajra Buddha Lord had spoken, Futian bowed in greeting and said, You must know that Qingyao had experienced the evils of the world in her youth. At that time, no one saved her from the dangers. Later, she was brought to the dark world, yet no one came out to stop them. Everything now is the result of everything in the past. Now, how can you put all the blame on her? It is just that she is in darkness at present and acts in spite of herself. Not everyone in the world has the right to choose. This world was not only black and white. Did the warriors of justice of the human realm have any less blood on their hands? Futian had suffered all of that in the Western Heaven Buddhist realm. How many horrible Buddhist sects were there? Indeed, but today's catastrophe is also truly happening, the Vajra Buddha Lord said, putting his hands together. At this time, another great Buddha walked out. This great Buddha was very tall, and strands of brilliant divine light streamed on his body, making people feel extremely comfortable. However, his eyes were not so friendly. They were very aggressive with hints of coldness. He looked down at Futian like a furious ancient Buddha. Futian had not met this Buddha in the Western Heaven before because his cultivation court was not in the spirit mountain of Western Heaven. He had not cultivated in the Western Heaven either, but he did have some connection to Futian. It was the medicine Buddha Lord. He had once healed Jinshan's injuries. After healing, Jinshan had tried to kill Futian but ended up killed by Futian instead. The medicine Buddha Lord was respected and reputed. He had a very high status in the Buddhist sects and rarely went out of his mountain, always cultivating. This time, he had been asked to come out. Darkness had swept across the ruins continent now, and the war was about to erupt, so the medicine Buddha Lord had been invited here. Stubborn. Looking at Futian, the medicine Buddha Lord said, You once cultivated at the spirit mountain of Western Heaven. You studied the Buddhist scriptures for decades and are now successful. But instead of using it to purge the souls and destroy the darkness, you are standing on the side of darkness. If it is karma, as you said, do you mean that it is the Buddhist clans that planted this bad seed? Seeing the medicine Buddha Lord come out, the other Western Heaven Buddhists that had been friendly towards Futian now put their hands together and started chanting the name of the Buddha. It seemed that the medicine Buddha Lord was quite unhappy with Futian's insistence too. Of course, he would not know if there were other reasons. The medicine Buddha Lord had healed two great Buddhas before. One was Jinshan, while the other was Shinyan Buddha Lord. But after these two great Buddhas had been healed, Futian quickly killed them. He did not know if the medicine Buddha Lord held grudges because of this. As junior, I will not voluntarily become enemies with the Buddhist clans. I only wish to protect the people I care for and hope you will not blame me. Yi Futian did not lose his temper. After hearing the medicine Buddha Lord's accusations, he bowed slightly and answered politely. After all, the other party was not wrong. He studied in the Western Heaven and was taught the Buddhist principles. He naturally respected the Buddhists. Chapter 27:63 Divine Power. The medicine Buddha Lord stared at Yi Futian and said, "The Dark Court declared war. If you turn back now, there is still a chance." "Great Buddha, please forgive me," Yi Futian said, bowing again. "In other words, you insist on your position and will ally with the darkness," the medicine Buddha Lord said coldly, like a furious Buddha. "I repeat, the Dark Court has nothing to do with me, but I was the one who named Yi Qingyao, so I naturally will protect her," Yi Futian said. "If you believe she committed some great sin, then I am willing to bear it for her." "Bear it how?" the medicine Buddha Lord asked. "I will follow the rules of the cultivation world," Yi Futian said. After he spoke, all the cultivators in the space fell silent. What were the rules of the cultivation world? The strong figures had the right to speak and decide. As for what was right or wrong, it was a sham. How many of the people who came here to cultivate were innocent, whose hands were not dyed with blood after reaching a certain cultivation level? What had Yi Futian encountered when he'd gone to the Western Heaven realm? Had Saint Jinshan been right or wrong? Had the Shinyan Buddha Lord and Tongchan Buddha Lord been right or wrong? When the 6 ancient god clans had unified with the divine prefecture to break into the original realm and Ziwei Segmentum, who had represented justice. Back when Yi Qingyao had only been a little girl, senior monks from the Buddhist clans had wanted to kill her, believing that she would bring about destruction. She had only been a pitiful person at that time. What wrong had she committed? "Very well," the medicine Buddha Lord said. "In that case, you can go with her." "Yi Futian, you voluntarily stood on the side of darkness this time, declaring war on the divine prefecture," Dong Huangdiuan said just as coldly. Murderous intent surged from her. "Father did not want to bother with you back then, but now that you are standing against the divine prefecture, the people of the divine prefecture will not show any mercy either." Yi Futian glanced at Dong Huangdiuan and said, "When did the cultivators of the divine prefecture ever show any mercy to me? However, my fate with Princess Donghuang back in the restricted area last time is still unforgettable for me." Dong Huangdiuan grew livid as she glared at Yi Futian. Many other cultivators instantly had surprised expressions, and they looked at Dong Huangdiuan and Yi Futian. What had happened with them in the restricted area? Boom! A shocking might exploded. The power of the ancestor dragon and phoenix on Dong Huangdiuan was released to a horrifying state. With her body as the center, it seemed that a frightening sword matrix had appeared in the sky. Countless brilliant spiritual swords were formed. She pointed directly at Yi Futian, and the Tianqing divine sword zoomed down instantly, breaking through the void. It was much stronger than back then in the Devil Imperial Palace. Yi Futian took a step forward. He also pointed into the sky, and a similarly frightening and shocking divine sword burst forth. Countless sword intents gathered, and the heaven-slaying divine sword pierced through the sky. In an instant, 2 forces collided in the sky. The Tianqing divine sword contained the power of the ancestor dragon and phoenix. It was incredibly domineering. The phantoms of the ancestor dragon phoenix even appeared around the divine sword, as if this was the sword of Dragon Phoenix. It went down against the tide, bursting through everything. But the heaven-slaying divine sword that Yi Futian had created showed the emerald light of the divine ruler. It formed the immense divine power of laws and clashed against the ancestor Dragon Phoenix sword. Destructive light in the sky spread to the surroundings, sweeping through the boundless space. Thankfully, the cultivators in this area were all powerful. Even if they were hit, they could still block the energy of the shockwaves. Yi Futian walked forward, took 1 step, passed right through Sword Chi's storm, and walked toward Dong Huangdiuan. The aura on Dong Huangdiuan was also becoming more frightening. When she saw Yi Futian walk over, she also stepped forward. Back then, the two had been at the same level when they'd clashed directly. Now, she had inherited the power of the ancestor Dragon Phoenix, while Yi Futian had inherited the light of the divine ruler's power. What would the result be like? This was their 3rd battle. The first time was in the Devil Imperial Palace. The second was in the restricted area. At that time, she had been hurt and had been more restricted than Yi Futian, so Yi Futian had the upper hand. This time, she had recovered to her prime state. Roar! The shocking dragon roar filled the sky, reverberating many people's eardrums and shaking their spiritual souls. Yi Futian also experienced this intense shaking. It was as if his will would be shattered. It felt like the ancestor dragon had come back to life behind Donghuang Diyuan. Dragon soul. Many people were shaken, and they stared at Donghuang Diyuan. She faced Yi Futian with all her might, even releasing the dragon soul power of the ancestor dragon that she had inherited in the Naga ruins. One could imagine how terrifying the power was. Under that force, it seemed that Yi Futian would be killed just by the shocks. This was not all. Donghuang Diyuan's body seemed to be burning too. The power of the ancestor phoenix was burning within her, causing Donghuang Diyuan to seem like a phoenix goddess at this moment. The divine silhouette of the phoenix appeared on her, and a phoenix imprint appeared between her brows. She was extremely beautiful. Accompanied by the roar, the silhouette of the ancestor dragon rushed down towards where Yi Futian was. It seemed to want to swallow Yi Futian's body under that frightening roar. Buddhist light shone on Yi Futian's body. Like the Akalanatha battle form, his willpower was indestructible. At the same time, the power of the divine ruler surged wildly from within. The divine ruler formed a giant sword before him. There were countless dazzling divine veins on the sword. Every vein contained incredible power. The huge sword grew segment by segment, becoming bigger and bigger until it was 300 zhang long. Many cultivators looked at this divine sword in shock. It was no longer an average divine sword. It seemed to be the sword of law formed by the heavenly laws. The divine ruler that Yi Futian had swallowed turned into a sword. So the ruler was the sword, and the sword was the ruler. The form was only external. What it represented was law and order. It could shatter everything. This force made everyone feel the scariness of the divine ruler once again. What kind of power was this? When the ancestor dragon rushed down with indomitable divine power, Yi Futian pressed a palm on the huge sword and stabbed through the sky, rushing up. The ancient dragon's divine power materialized into a divine dragon, forcing down the sky and crashing against the divine sword. Roar! It was another earth-shaking roar. The indomitable divine power could crumble the mountain and rivers, but the huge divine sword stabbed straight into the dragon's body. There was a loud and horrifying noise, and the sword passed directly through the dragon's body and kept going forward as if it wanted to break apart the world. The divine dragon roared in anger, and its body shook intensely. The loud and horrifying noise spread throughout. The law was collapsing. Everything was about to be destroyed. Boom! With a loud boom, the frightening divine dragon was penetrated through. The huge divine sword kept zooming toward Donghuang Diyuan. Donghuang Diyuan transformed into a divine phoenix, and her hands transformed into humongous and sharp fiery red claws. The divine phoenix claws slammed down directly on the huge, incoming sword. Even though the divine swords might have been significantly reduced, they still contained immense power. Boom! Donghuang Diyuan's body flew out with another loud sound, forced back by Yi Futian. However, Yi Futian did not stop. He continued advancing, and the divine sword remained. He seemed to want to kill Donghuang Diyuan here. Such a terrifying attack. Everyone's hearts were in terror. They all stared at the battlefield. The divine sword arrived in a flash, going straight for Donghuang Diyuan. At that moment, Donghuang Diyuan's beautiful eyes looked down, and another gust of divine power surged from her body. When this gust of divine power appeared, a formless strength appeared in the surrounding skies and lands. It seemed to want to weaken the powers of all great paths in the world. Bang! Yi Futian attacked again with the divine sword, crashing into the divine phoenix. That formless strength swept by, and Yi Futian felt that his will of the great path was sealed off. Seeing this scene, everything in the surroundings seemed to be frozen. Countless eyes stared in Donghuang Diyuan's direction. These top figures all knew what that burst of divine power meant. Donghuang the Great was peerless and unparalleled. He rose to the top and ruled the divine prefecture with Emperor Yi Qing back then. The two both had unmatchable talent. Emperor Yi Qing had been skilled at controlling the beasts, while Donghuang the Great had special abilities. This power could restrict the techniques of the world. Donghuang the Great continued to become stronger, and after he cultivated it to the point, hence, it evolved into divine power. It became known as the divine power that was the strongest and most difficult to cultivate in the world. Now, had Donghuang Diyuan touched upon it. Chapter 2764 Revelation Divine Power, Three-Ruler Law. This burst of divine power was colorless and formless. It transformed into a domain, enveloping Yi Futian's body directly. It even spread towards the boundless lands. The terrifying spiritual energy storm transformed into the aggressive domain power. Under this domain, every cultivator felt extremely uncomfortable. Their wills were restricted, and the great path's force within them was similarly restricted. This was a kind of invisible constraint. Cultivators who had not gone through tribulation lost their combat ability directly and could not move. Their bodies were drenched with sweat instantly. Yi Futian was the closest to Donghuang Diyuan and felt this intensely. The terrifying divine power pressed down on his will and pressed down on his path. He had felt this power before. He had once used a similar power before. The power contained in the Ukiyo song was unreachable in the world. However, the Ukiyo song that he used could not be compared to the current power. This tangible improvement could even be called divine power now. She had only touched upon it, but even so, it was already highly horrifying. It was unimaginable how horrifying it would be if a great emperor had released this divine power. The top figures of each world stared at Donghuang Diyuan. Everyone understood clearly that Donghuang the Great's divine power was extremely hard to cultivate successfully. Even though Donghuang Diyuan was his child, it was still not easily inherited. Now, they finally saw the divine power of Donghuang the Great bloom from Donghuang Diyuan. Donghuang Diyuan had completed the first transformation. Divine Power Revelation. This was the divine power that was unique to Donghuang the Great. No one else could do it. How of the human realm studied Donghuang Diyuan. Had she awoken her divine power? Then they looked toward Yi Futian. Donghuang Diyuan released her divine power, while Yi Futian also displayed the beast control ability that Emperor Yi Qing had been skilled yet. These mortal enemies finally showed the skills of the twin emperors in this duel. Donghuang Diyuan studied Yi Futian with her pretty eyes. Elegant yet cold, it seemed that she had recovered her original state, the high and mighty princess of the divine prefecture. Since you don't know your place, then I will make it easy for you, Donghuang Diyuan said coldly. The revelation divine power exploded, and a horrifying divine power storm swept towards Yi Futian, causing all of his power to be restricted. On the other hand, Donghuang Diyuan seemed to have gotten even stronger. Tianqing. A phoenix divine sword materialized. An endless sword intent exploded with the revelation divine power. That moment, all of the force of the great path before Yi Futian shattered. The surrounding endless sword intent turned to smoke instantly, becoming dust under the divine power. The phoenix divine sword blasted onto his divine sword. Under this horrible power, it seemed that no force of the great path could survive. Bang! With a loud bang, the divine sword crumbled into nothing. Yi Futian's figure also vanished from his spot and appeared in another direction. However, he still felt that he was in the range of the divine power. In fact, the divine power had affected his body. Even his celerity was restricted by the divine power. Donghuang Diyuan's gaze turned and looked up at Yi Futian in the sky. Her expression was indifferent. Within the divine power's domain, Yi Futian felt that his abilities were heavily restricted, drastically weakening his combat abilities. Careful, it's the revelation divine power of Donghuang the Great. Supreme Swordlord transmitted his voice to Yi Futian. He was standing below, but even he could feel how frightening the divine power was. He cultivated the supreme way and had already touched the fringe of divine power. If he could reach the great emperor plane, then the supreme divine power might counter the revelation divine power, but it wasn't certain. Now, these momentous figures were truly climbing onto the stage of history. Just at this moment, divine emerald light shimmered where Yi Futian was. It exploded viciously even under the restraints of the revelation divine power. The emerald windstorm encircled Yi Futian's body. The power of the divine ruler within him seemed to have been released fully at this moment, causing a shocking emerald storm to appear around him. It wasn't restricted by the revelation divine power at all. This, so powerful. The strong cultivators' hearts all shook at this scene. The power of the divine ruler that Futian inherited was also an extreme divine power. This force was not restricted by the revelation divine power and burst forth viciously, forming a boundlessly huge divine ruler. Shocking divine runes flowed in the divine ruler, making the sky and earth extremely heavy. Boom! Then Futian released his form, instantly transforming into a giant. Like a deity, he wielded the huge divine ruler. Horrifying power burst forth as he stepped towards Donghuang Diyuan. Merely one step shook the void. The space was about to disintegrate. Boom! Then Futian swung up the divine ruler like a deity. An unsurmountable power seemed to want to shatter the earth, and countless silhouettes of the divine ruler appeared in the sky. They bloomed under the restriction of the divine power. What technique or method is this? The strong cultivators all stared at Futian. When Futian transformed into a deity wielding the divine ruler, the vast group of cultivators felt a supreme divine might. A suffocating pressure appeared in the boundless land too. There was the bright chirp of a phoenix, and the divine phoenix void covered the phoenix divine sword. At the same time, countless phoenix silhouettes and the divine sword containing the fire of the divine phoenix burned towards Futian. The laws of the world, the three-ruler law. The deity-like figure uttered that and wielded the divine ruler in his hands. Tens of thousands of ruler silhouettes covered the sky and sun, sweeping by. They transformed into an absolute law domain. The forces shooting toward Futian disintegrated in that instant, turning into dust. No force could approach him other than the revelation divine power. Donghuang Diyuan was some distance away from Futian, but she could still feel how frightening that force was. The laws of the world, the three-ruler law? All the strong cultivators stared in the direction of Futian. Where had he cultivated and learned this divine technique? Boom! An extremely wild storm swept over, lifting a frightening force. Everyone stared over there. Under this storm, many people started retreating, worried that this attack would reach them. It was as if no force could withstand near Futian. The cultivators in the distance also looked over here. It was such an intense duel, the fated battle between the descendants of Emperor Yiqing and Donghuang the Great. Futian, son of Emperor Yiqing, was not any weaker than Donghuang Diyuan, daughter of Donghuang the Great, even though Donghuang Diyuan had released the revelation divine power. The second ruler was released. Thousands of arms appeared behind Donghuang Diyuan, and she stabbed with the divine sword simultaneously, attacking the thousands of ruler silhouettes that Futian sent down. Boom, boom, boom. The horrible sounds continued. The sky and earth cracked and collapsed. That unsurmountable force overpowered everything. The aura is stronger now. The three-ruler law, could the three rulers determine the universe? Everyone stared at Futian. In this case, would the next ruler be the strongest attack, enough to destroy all? At this time, even Donghuang Diyuan's expression was extremely grave. Supported by the divine power, she pushed her force to the max. Chapter 2765 Clash of Divine Power. When the third ruler slammed down, all the ruler silhouettes in the sky unified, becoming one ruler. The vast domain transformed into the domain of the three-ruler law. All the force of the great path was about to be pulverized. Terrible divine flames, the illusory silhouettes of the true dragon and ancient phoenix, and countless sword silhouettes were all destroyed in that law domain. There was a muffled sound. Even though they were far away, the cultivators in surrounding areas could all feel how frightening this ruler's power was. It was like a blow from a deity. Boom! A huge divine phoenix appeared behind Donghuang Diyuan. It was as if a fire burned in her body, undefeatable like a goddess. The revelation divine power swept forth and restricted the strength of the third ruler. However, the muffled boom continued and was unstoppable. The colorless and formless revelation divine power intersected and clashed in the air with the emerald power of the divine ruler. There were restrictions, but it could not fend off this destructive blow. Donghuang Diyuan felt that she was also inside the three-ruler law's domain. Even though the massive ruler silhouettes had transformed into one ruler, she still felt that there were countless ruler silhouettes everywhere. This was the conception of the domain restricting her. The ancient dragon's soul seemed to have been awakening. The bright dragon roar shook countless people's eardrums. The revelation divine power swept past, and paired with the dragon roar, the cultivators under the tribulation plane directly lost their combat ability. Even cultivators who had passed the divine tribulation of the Great Path similarly found it hard to budge. They were firmly restricted, and this was not even a direct attack. They were only bystanders. One could imagine what kind of force Futian was enduring. But even so, Futian was still the one with the upper hand. Not only did he not retreat, he even unleashed a shocking attack. How horrifying was the power of the ancient dragon! It was the strongest of the historical divine powers. When unleashed with the revelation divine power, it spurred the ancient phoenix divine sword, transforming into a true phoenix divine sword. It burned with divine phoenix fire and bore the power of Tianqing. It stabbed forward without obstacles, and the huge divine sword and the incoming divine ruler crashed in the sky. That moment, a destructive windstorm swept over. Divine light of the Great Path shone across everything, lifting a shocking wave. Bang, bang. Many people were sent flying by this storm. Even the shock waves could sweep them out and make them spit out blood. The top figures of the Emperor-level forces released strong domain power to protect the cultivators beside them. When the destructive storm arrived, cracks even appeared in the domains. Dihao and other top figures stood in the storm, steady and upright, but their expressions were still exceptionally grave as they stared at these two strong cultivators. The combat abilities of both Futian and Donghuang Diyuan were extremely shocking. Of course, they weren't surprised that Donghuang Diyuan could have these abilities. She was the daughter of Donghuang the Great, after all. She had been taught by Donghuang the Great since childhood and inherited his divine power, so she naturally had very strong trump cards. But even though Futian was the descendant of Emperor Qing, he had never indeed received much guidance or heritages. His cultivation resources were far off from Donghuang Diyuan. He had accomplished all this by himself, step by step, so it was extremely shocking that he could release such terrifying abilities. The destructive storm swept through, and the true phoenix divine sword shattered. The divine ruler was also crumbling bit by bit, but that horrible storm still swept towards the two. Futian's godly body took a few steps back. His feet stepped in the sky and steadied himself after a loud boom. Meanwhile, Donghuang Diyuan's body was sent flying. She let out a muffled grunt, and there was blood at the corner of her lips. She lifted her head. Her beautiful features seemed a bit pale now, and the divine phoenix imprint between her brows seemed a bit dull. Her pretty eyes looked towards Futian. Futian felt a complicated emotion flash through her eyes at that moment, but it was gone in an instant, and she became indifferent. She stared coldly at him. That windstorm finally swept past, and everyone took a deep breath. Their hearts had gone through tremendous ups and downs. When they looked toward the battlefield, their hearts pulsed. This battle had affected them very strongly. Futian had forced Donghuang Diyuan back, and it was Donghuang Diyuan who had activated the revelation divine power. As expected, Futian was now qualified to stand at the pinnacle and compete for the emperor position with the others. Who of these unparalleled figures could step onto the path to the great emperor? What power is the divine ruler that you received? Donghuang Diyuan asked Futian, voice frigid. Princess, if you're so curious, how about I tell you privately? Futian answered with a cold sneer. The power of the divine ruler was compatible with his life spirit. He had been learning this power continuously these past few years to turn it into his way. It was not merely a type of power, nor did it belong to any way. Of course, he would not tell any of this to Donghuang Diyuan. Plus, there were so many strong figures here. It was honestly a bit strange for Donghuang Diyuan to ask that. While they were speaking, a shocking aura suddenly spread over. Dazzling light enveloped the land, and many people looked up. They saw Dihao's figure appear in the sky, radiating with incredible divine light. A righteous air seemed to appear in the sky and land at that moment. The entire world's power seemed to be resonating with his body. Was Dihao going to attack too? A holy figure appeared. Dihao had transformed into the divine human, sovereign of the world. He stood high in the sky as if all the power in the world was his to use. That righteous air was the correct way of the world. He could control all the power in the world as if he was the god of this world. The divine human, the power of the human world. Futian furrowed his brows. This burst of power was pressing down straight at him. He had just battled furiously with Donghuang Diyuan, and now Dihao is going to get involved in the fight, just like attacking Yi Qingyao with Donghuang Diyuan previously. It seemed that the rumors might be true. The human ancestor of the human realm might really propose marriage to Donghuang the Great and want a marriage alliance. He kept stepping out to ally with Donghuang Diyuan. Was he trying to imply something? Many huge divine swords abruptly appeared in the sky. A muffled air covered the boundless void, and the huge divine swords hovered in the air above the strong cultivators' heads. They pointed in Yi Futian's direction. Yi Futian, since you fell voluntarily to ally with darkness, the human realm can only work to rid the darkness, Dihao announced. His voice shook the heavens. Transformed into the divine human, he carried natural mightiness. He pointed down with a finger, and there were horrifying booming sounds. The sword of mankind shot down, going murderously towards Yi Futian. The divine ruler in Yi Futian's hands pierced through the void and instantly formed a terrifying divine ruler domain. The huge divine sword shot down but couldn't break into the domain. It was outside the divine ruler domain. But Dihao did not stop. The power of the world kept converging into divine swords, seamless, endless, crazily stabbing towards Yi Futian. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.